Chapter 321, Myriad Reincarnation Scripture. While Chuzan was waiting for the 40-year milestone reward to arrive, the situation in the Western Zone changed again. The human race had adopted a strategy of separating and purifying the blood-colored spiritual energy after Ding Yu and Xiaoliang had arrived. They had led a group of cultivators who had comprehended some form of intent to exhaust the experts of the Blood Fiend race, and had achieved a series of victories. The Blood Fiend race also changed their strategy. It was unknown as to what method they used, but there were suddenly some extremely powerful elite Blood Fiends, who targeted Ding Yu, Xiaoliang, and the others. These elite Blood Fiends were much stronger than the Blood Fiends of the same realm. Moreover, they had the ability to regenerate their limbs, and even their heads, which made them extremely difficult to kill. Even though Ding Yu had severely injured his opponent several times, he was still unable to kill him. At this moment, all the human cultivators realized that the Blood Fiend race had changed. Their intelligence was increasing, they had acquired some new skills and understood strategies. They no longer blindly relied on their ability to revive. Now, they were not afraid of the Blood Fiend race's recklessness, but rather their treachery. The Blood Fiend race had become even harder to deal with. On the battlefield, Xiaoliang wielded his spear as he fought with a Blood Fiend. The Blood Fiend was surging with battle intent, while his long spear was emitting a cold gleam as it continuously suppressed the Blood Fiend. Xiaoliang's opponent was a Blood Fiend whose body was as red as blood, and had a youthful face. This Blood Fiend was one of the heavens blessed created by the Blood Fiend race. Moreover, he was also the strongest one. Boom! Xiaoliang stabbed his spear into his opponent's chest. However, the Blood Fiend's eyes did not even flinch. The blood-red saber was already slashing toward him. The Blood Fiend was trying to achieve mutual destruction. After all, the Blood Fiend could revive. A special energy circulated through Xiaoliang's body, which slowed down the Blood Fiend's saber. Boom! Xiaoliang shook his long spear and continuously attacked the Blood Fiend, sending the latter flying. At the same time, the slow vine used its power to slow down the recovery speed of the Blood Fiend. Xiaoliang kept attacking and attacking again and again. Beads of sweat dripped down his forehead. Using the slow vine's power would consume a lot of energy. Furthermore, the slow vine's power would not last long. He had to destroy the opponent before the slow vine's power dissipated. Behind Xiaoliang, battle intent condensed into a terrifying divine image that merged with him and unleashed a powerful attack. Rumble! The Blood Fiend exploded and turned into a bloody mist that filled the sky. Annihilate! Xiaoliang raised his hand and punched, completely annihilating the blood mist that was slowly spreading out. He had finally killed the Blood Fiend's heavens blessed. Xiaoliang panted heavily and retreated back to the human camp to recover. Your disciple, Xiaoliang, has killed the Blood Fiend race's #1 heavens blessed and fought for fate during the Great Daoyuan calamity. His cultivation has soared, your Fate Dao principle has advanced. Chuzan revealed a gratified smile. Sure enough, his disciples did not disappoint him. They fought for fate during the Great Daoyuan calamity again and again. His Fate Dao principle had advanced by another level. Chuzan estimated that if the Fate Dao principle continued to advance, it would eventually transform into the Great Dao of Fate, which would allow him to better pry into the secrets of heaven. The #1 genius of the Blood Fiend race had been completely annihilated. It was quite a major blow to them. The morale of the human race rose again. Ding Yu and Xiaoliang were already famous among the humans in the Western Zone. Their fame had long surpassed that of Yu Shu. There was already a saying in the Western Zone, Ding Yu's sword, Xiaoliang's spear, unparalleled in the world. Chuzan could not help but sigh. The Great Daoyuan calamity was indeed a great opportunity. Ding Yu and Xiaoliang relied on this to rapidly increase their cultivation levels. Both had reached the 9th level of the Heaven Realm. Ding Yu and Xiaoliang's fate increased explosively, and even the heavenly Dao law's speed of devouring the laws of heaven and earth of the central region increased. Qin Ying was still in the midst of fighting in the Eastern Zone. His fate was also getting stronger and stronger, in tandem with his cultivation level. Once again, the majesty and prestige of the great Qin Emperor was displayed. Of Chuzan's other disciples, Shangxing and Wang Luo, there were no major movements just yet. Heiyu appeared to be silent, but her plans in the Chaos Zone were progressing alongside the Heavenly Dao Talisman plan. The Heavenly Dao laws had already seeped into the 3 regions of the Chaos Zone. Hu Tianya was also preparing for battle in the Monster Zone. He did not attack immediately, but waited for an opportunity to obtain great fortune in one fell swoop. This tiger was not stupid. In fact, he was a little cunning. The battle between the Buddhists and the Blood Fiend race was still ongoing, while everything remained quiet in the central zone. Qianming was biding his time as well. The calm in the central zone was unusual. Moreover, the fate of the central zone could not be seen clearly either. It seemed like there were some old monsters hidden there. Chuzan suspected that there were Dao realm experts who had quietly left the primordial land and had entered Calamity. They were hidden among the ancient factions of the central zone. However, even if there were Dao realm cultivators, they were most likely at the first or second level of the Dao realm. There was nothing to be afraid of. Chuzan turned his attention away from the situation in the 9 zones and focused on cultivating and advancing the Heavenly Dao Talisman plan. The 40-year milestone finally arrived. You remained in seclusion for 40 years. Your mentality is stable and your methods are varied. You've advanced the Heavenly Dao Talisman plan and nurtured outstanding disciples. Please continue to work hard. You have been rewarded with the Myriad Reincarnation Scripture. Oh, Chuzan examined the reward. The Myriad Reincarnation Scripture. Chuzan's heart trembled. What cultivation technique was this? After mastering the Myriad Reincarnation Scripture, could one be immortal? However, this kind of immortality was not quite the same as what he had expected. Still, Chuzan's heart trembled, and a thought flashed through his mind. His breathing became heavy. Reincarnation. Countless lives started and passed every single day. This process was guided by reincarnation. However, it was different from reincarnating one's consciousness. This was the entire process of reincarnation, which did not exist in the 9 zones. At this moment, Chuzan had a bold idea. A method to perfect the heavenly Dao laws was born in his heart. Reincarnation. If he could recreate the reincarnation process within the heavenly Dao laws, it would work in tandem with the ghost world. The ghost world was hell, and after death, one would enter the reincarnation cycle and be reincarnated to balance the world. At the same time, he would use this to usurp the foundation of the Great Tao. If he created the Great Tao of reincarnation himself. The more Chuzan thought about it, the more excited he became. The foundation of the Myriad Reincarnation Scripture was to establish the Great Tao of reincarnation. If he established the Great Tao of reincarnation and used reincarnation to connect the Great Tao with the Heavenly Tao laws, completing the cycle of life and death in the 9 zones, what would happen? Chapter 322, Reincarnation Tao Principle. Chuzan was moved. If he could use this method to connect the Great Tao to the Heavenly Tao laws, he would be able to usurp the former. Furthermore, once he succeeded, he would be invincible. He had been working hard to accomplish this, but it seemed that he had finally found a breakthrough point. Although it would still take a long time, at least this method was feasible. Chuzan's gaze turned to the Chaos Zone, as well as the Eastern, Southern, and Western zones. He felt an impulse to use radical methods to devour the laws of heaven and earth of the 4 zones. No, I have to remain steady. I can't act on impulse. Chuzan took a deep breath to calm himself down. Any impulsive actions might cause problems with the Great Tao, or the calamity itself. He could not be too hasty. Chuzan received the Myriad Reincarnation Scripture. Countless insights were instilled into him and, in an instant, he entered a mysterious state of enlightenment, witnessing the entire cycle of reincarnation in his mind. Chuzan did not know how long the state of enlightenment lasted, but he saw one Tao principle after another born. When Chuzan woke up from his state of enlightenment, he was shocked to find that he had comprehended dozens of Tao principles, and his cultivation level had broken through. 15th level of the Tao realm. Among the many Tao principles, one Tao principle was especially special. It was like a disc that was slowly rotating, mysterious, and touching upon the laws of life and death, and yin and yang. The reincarnation Tao principle. Chuzan let out a long breath. Since he had comprehended the reincarnation Tao principle, he now had the foundation to establish the Great Tao of reincarnation. This Tao principle was very special, and different from the other Tao principles. Chuzan waved his hand, and the reincarnation Tao principle entered the pocket dimension. One end was connected to the origin Tao crystal, while the other end was connected to the Great Tao. It also branched out and connected to the pocket dimension, the ghost world and the Buddhist world. At the same time, it was connected to the Heavenly Tao Talisman. He first introduced the reincarnation Tao principle into the Heavenly Tao laws of the Northern Zone. Chuzan began to attempt to construct the reincarnation cycle, starting from the Northern Zone. Even if the Heavenly Tao laws were not perfect, it was possible with the reincarnation Tao principle to bring some of the Northern Zone's dead beings into the ghost world to undergo reincarnation. However, it was currently limited to a few hundred beings at a time, and those beings could not be too strong. The Emperor realm was the upper limit. Rumble. As the reincarnation Tao principle connected to the great Tao through the origin Tao crystal, Chuzan discovered that the reincarnation Tao principle was undergoing some changes. The origin Tao crystal seemed to be affected by this and began to undergo its own transformation. The heavenly Tao laws were also changing. Chuzan silently examined the changes in the heavenly Tao laws and the transformation of the origin Tao crystal. At the same time, he continued to refine the reincarnation Tao principle. Hai absorbed a lump of chaotic energy to refine the reincarnation Tao principle. Next, using the Northern Zone's heavenly Tao laws as an experiment, he attempted to introduce the reincarnation cycle. Chuzan wanted to establish the great Tao of reincarnation. As the reincarnation Tao principle was constantly tempered and improved, it would slowly transform into the great Tao of reincarnation. The origin Tao crystal had already started the process of transformation. Once the transformation was complete, he could enter the great Tao through the origin Tao crystal. There were many things he could do there. Of course, in order to avoid any accidents, he would not easily enter the great Tao, much less travel on the great Tao. He did not want the system to consider that as him having left the courtyard, which would ruin his current streak. Southern Zone. Shangxing looked at the sky with a solemn gaze. Wang Luo stood beside him. Are you really going to do this? No matter what, I have to save my mother. You're not going to save your family's ancestor. Wang Luo scratched his head and said, actually, it doesn't have to be master. I can refine pills to save your family's ancestor. Shangxing looked at him in surprise and said, Feng Tong is a former human king and an expert who has surpassed the divine realm. Can you really refine pills to save him? Wang Luo's alchemy skills were indeed extraordinary, but he had only reached the heaven realm. How could he save a Tao realm expert? Are you looking down on me? Wang Luo continued proudly, I am an alchemy god. I might even be regarded as the progenitor of alchemy in the future. Saving such a person is child's play. Besides, I can use Tao-level spiritual medicine to save a Tao realm warrior. It's no problem. Shangxing exclaimed in surprise, you can refine Tao-level spiritual medicine. Of course. Wang Luo patted his chest. We'll see. It depends on the Feng family's attitude. Shangxing shook his head. What ancestor? He was not even a member of the Feng family. The blood fiend race is a little terrifying. The Western Zone has almost fallen. Both of them sighed. Moreover, from the news they heard, it seemed that the blood fiend race was undergoing changes. It was becoming more and more terrifying. The great Daoyuan calamity is coming, but the Feng family still won't let anyone go. Damn it. Wang Luo patted his shoulder and said, the Feng family's human king is their savior. The great Daoyuan calamity is coming, but their savior is still in a state of deep sleep. They will only blame your mother more. Boom. A murderous aura swept out from the distance. This was an ancient battlefield. The blood fiend race was about to descend. Shangxing and Wang Luo looked up and waited quietly. This ancient battlefield in the northern region of the southern zone was not large. The blood fiends here would not be strong. At the very least, there would be no divine realm blood fiends during the initial descent. At this ancient battlefield, Shangxing and Wang Luo worked together to set up a great formation. Hua Xiang walked over. You really want to do this? She looked at Shangxing helplessly. I have to do this. I know what I have to do, Shangxing said with a determined gaze. If you do this, you will attract great karma. Aren't you afraid of becoming a sinner of the southern zone? Everyone here will regard you as their enemy. Sinner. Shangxing laughed lightly and said, it's just a human king's family. In a great calamity, many experts will be annihilated. It's not up to some people to judge whether or not I am a sinner. After a pause, he continued, so what if they see me as a sinner? They have not judged me worthy of being a member of the same family. Wang Luo sighed and patted Shangxing on the shoulder, saying, your state of mind is troubled. Is there a reason to explain all of this to her? You must remember that if you don't have a woman in your heart, you will naturally become a god when refining artifacts. Don't be led astray by beauty. Hua Xiang's face immediately darkened. Shangxing's mouth twitched, but he did not reply. He was already used to it. His eldest senior brother Ding Yu was a unique character. In addition, he had dragged Wang Luo into the same abyss of believing that they should have no women in their hearts. Chapter 323. Refining 100,000 Blood Fiends. Boom. The world trembled as the aura of the blood fiend race spread out. An ancient battlefield appeared. Immediately after, an army of blood fiends appeared. They're here. Shangxing's expression was solemn. With a wave of his hand, more than 1,000 puppets appeared, spreading out in all directions. Meanwhile, Wang Luo rose into the air. With a wave of his hands, pills shot out in all directions, flickering with rays of light. Hua Xiang retreated quickly to intercept the cultivators who had sensed the commotion. Shang Xing and Wang Luo each took a side. The formation was activated, and rays of light shot into the sky. A huge barrier enveloped the Blood Fiend army and the ancient battlefield. Immediately after, countless flames surged out of the barrier. Roar! The Blood Fiends in the formation sensed the danger and let out an angry roar. The blood-colored spiritual energy soared into the sky, as if trying to break the formation. Whoosh! More than 1,000 puppets rose into the air and spread out in all directions around the formation. Rays of light surged into the formation, stabilizing it. At the same time, pills exploded within the formation. Countless killing formations were activated in an instant, killing the Blood Fiends. Shang Xing and Wang Luo worked together to activate the formation. Flames surged everywhere, and the killing formations were continuously activated, killing the Blood Fiends. The Blood Fiends inside roared furiously as they tried to resist. However, under the bombardment of the formation, they were completely powerless to resist. After half a day, only the blood-colored spiritual energy was left within the formation. It had become as thick as blood. Shang Xing and Wang Luo made their move and activated the formation. Streams of flames turned into mysterious runes that enveloped the blood-colored spiritual energy. The blood-colored spiritual energy underwent some changes as it was being refined. The formation also began to shrink, condensing the blood-colored spiritual energy into a huge ball and wrapping it within the formation. Let's go! Shang Xing and Wang Luo carried the huge ball of blood-colored spiritual energy and headed toward the Feng family's territory. Your disciples, Shang Xing and Wang Luo, have refined 100,000 Blood Fiends and have exterminated a branch of the Blood Fiend race. They have obtained great calamity and fortune, and their cultivations have soared. You have been rewarded with the Evil Tao Principle and your Fate Tao Principle has advanced. Chu Zan was refining the Reincarnation Tao Principle and perfecting the reincarnation cycle when the system's reward suddenly arrived. Refining 100,000 Blood Fiends and annihilating a branch of the Blood Fiend race. Wang Luo and Shang Xing were actually so fierce. Thinking back, Wang Luo and Shang Xing had used quite a lot of resources to prepare the formation in the pocket dimension. It seemed that they had set up a formation to refine the Blood Fiends. Although the blood-colored spiritual energy was a bit special, Wang Luo and Shang Xing had improved the formation. They were not refining the blood-colored spiritual energy directly, but rather, refining some special power within the Blood Fiend race. It seemed that it removed the Blood Fiend's ability to revive, making the odds even in battle. However, the price was a little high. It was unknown how many times Wang Luo and Shang Xing's formation could be used. Moreover, it could only be used against the Blood Fiends who had just descended and had yet to undergo a transformation. If this formation were to be placed in the Western Zone, it would probably not be able to achieve such a powerful effect. It could only weaken the Blood Fiend race's strength after they were revived, and also cancelling out their ability to increase their strength upon revival. However, such a formation was not so easy to set up. Wang Luo and Shang Xing had used the resources in the pocket dimension, including quite a number of special heavenly treasures, to create such a great formation. The Feng family's territory, in the forbidden area at the back mountain. The great Daoyuan calamity has arrived. Are you satisfied now? If our ancestor had recovered, he would definitely be able to lead the human race through the calamity and led our Feng family to rise up. Because of your selfish interests, the human race has no peerless experts to turn the tide in this calamity. The Western Zone is about to fall. Countless members of our human race have died. Half of the northern region of the Southern Zone has already fallen. Are you satisfied? Feng Yongxian roared angrily. Inside the forbidden cave, Feng Ruping remained silent. Regret, guilt, she felt none of it. Ever since her father, grandfather, and big brother, all of whom loved her dearly, died or disappeared while seeking treasures to save their ancestor, she had lost the ability to feel guilt or regret toward the Feng family. Feng Ruping, you are a sinner. Feng Yongxian roared. Hey, a sinner. Feng Ruping laughed lightly and said, is the ancestor very powerful? Can he turn the tide? If he was really so powerful and invincible, how did he end up in such a state? All of you simply can't accept the facts. The ancestor failed, and the Feng family declined. Instead of looking forward and fixing your own incompetence, you instead focused on reviving the ancestor. If the Feng family became stronger with each passing generation, the current Feng family would certainly be stronger than the ancestor. All of you are just finding excuses for your own incompetence and cowardice. At the end of her sentence, Feng Ruping almost screamed her lungs out. Feng Yongxian panted, his eyes were red as he shouted angrily, "You are not allowed to humiliate the previous generation." At this moment, a huge ball of blood-colored spiritual energy appeared in the distance. Feng Yongxian's expression changed drastically. The ball of blood-colored spiritual energy suddenly expanded and directly covered the sky above the Feng family's territory. Two figures appeared in the sky. "Feng family, release her or I will destroy your Feng family today." "How dare you?" Feng Yunxian was furious. He turned around and said coldly to Feng Ruping, "You really have a good son." The Feng family's experts appeared one after another. However, in the face of the giant ball of blood-colored spiritual energy, their expressions were extremely grave. Shangxing looked down and said coldly, "Feng family, either release her, or I will release the blood-colored spiritual energy and destroy the Feng family." "Do you know what you are doing? Are you going to betray the family?" Feng Yongxian's face was dark. That ball of blood-colored spiritual energy made his heart skip a beat as he looked at it. What was even more shocking was how Shangxing had managed to gather it all together. "Betray the family?" Shangxing laughed coldly and said, "Are you fit to accuse me? Release her, or I will destroy your Feng family." An old figure walked out from the forbidden area of the Feng family. The aura around his body was restrained. He looked old, but there was a terrifying power hidden within. Feng Yongxian hurriedly bowed and said, "Great-grandfather." The old man did not raise his head to look at Shangxing and Wang Luo. He said, "Feng Ruping has committed a big mistake. She deserves to be punished. It seems you are disobedient and seek your own destruction. The blood-colored spiritual energy is indeed terrifying, but it is not enough to destroy my Feng family. Moreover, your mother is also down there." Shangxing narrowed his eyes and sneered, "What grave mistake? For not sacrificing for the sake of your family's ancestor." The old man's expression froze. A powerful aura seeped out from his body. "Peak of the divine realm. What do you know?" Wang Luo said, "Old man, you let my junior brother's mother go and I'll save your ancestor. What do you think? Who do you think you are?" Feng Yongxian said angrily. "Who are you looking down on? You know how badly Feng Kong is injured. You can't save him with just a fire Dao fruit. Don't look at me like that. These so-called secrets are nothing to us. There are many secrets in the 9 zones. We know far more than your Feng family." Wang Luo sneered and said, "Feng Kong is lucky that he didn't die completely. The Monster King and Demon King were not as lucky." The old man's expression became more and more gloomy. Feng Kong's defeat was the shame of their Feng family. Now, a young man had reopened their wounds and even sprinkled salt on them. It would be strange if he was not angry. Chapter 324, Intimidating the Feng Family. Hua Xiang's figure flickered and appeared beside Shangxing. She looked at the old man with anxiety written all over her face. The other party was too strong. Feng Yongxian's gaze focused. Not only did Hua Xiang's strength recover, but she had even become stronger. Shangxing looked at the old man and sneered, "Let her go. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless. Even if the blood fiends can't destroy your Feng family, I, Shangxing, can. You want to kill me? Your Feng family isn't qualified. Even if Feng Kong was still alive, he wouldn't be qualified to do so." Shangxing's words were full of arrogance. Wang Luo furrowed his brows. The Feng family seemed determined not to let her go. Even when threatened with the blood-colored spiritual energy, they would not compromise. The Feng family elder was a peak divine realm expert. If he really attacked, Hua Xiang would not be able to stop him. "Why don't we ask Master to make a move and exterminate the Feng family to settle this once and for all?" Wang Luo said. He did not try to hide anything, so the Feng family naturally heard him. The old man from the Feng clan sneered, "Exterminate my Feng family? Do you know what a human king's family represents? Can you bear the consequences?" Wang Luo sneered and said, "So what if you're a human king's family? My junior brother Qin is also a descendant of a human king's family, and my junior sister Heiyu has the bloodline of an ancient human king's family. Your Feng family can't even hold a candle to them. In this world, strength speaks the loudest. Do you understand, old man? Moreover, it's the great Daoyuan calamity now, and there's an even more terrifying calamity coming after that. The title of the human king's family is no longer useful. Not to mention the human king's families, even the 9 zones may be wiped out. The expressions of the Feng family members changed. They all looked at Wang Luo. Was he bragging, or was it true? Wang Luo shook his head. Your Feng family is weak after all. You're unaware of the great Tao calamity. Let her go. I can save Fengtong on the account of his service to the human race. You're not qualified to say such words. Arrogant man, don't you dare humiliate my Feng family's ancestor. The old man was enraged. A powerful aura erupted. A phoenix wrapped in rolling flames rushed out and was about to attack Shangxing and Wang Luo. Hua Xiang's expression turned serious as she prepared to block the attack. At this moment, a chuckle was heard. Why bother? The Feng family's foundation is indeed weak, and the heir only a human king's family in name. A figure walked over with one hand behind his back and the other holding a folding fan. The elegant and handsome middle-aged man did not exude an aura, but he walked over step by step in the air as if his feet were following a rhythm. Every step he took was like a gong knocking on the old man's heart. The terrifying phoenix continued to sway. The old man's expression was grave, and beads of sweat dripped from his forehead. In the end, on the 12th step, the flaming phoenix crumbled and the old man spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at the person in shock. Shang Bang. Feng Yongxian had an expression of disbelief. Shangxing looked at the elegant man who was walking toward him with a complicated expression. Wang Luo's eyes widened as he said in shock, "This is your father. He's a little strong, but he doesn't look like a good person. He seems to be very calculative." The corner of Shang Xing's mouth twitched, but what Wang Luo said was true. Shang Bang was a very calculative person. Shang Bang's footsteps slightly paused. He looked at Wang Luo, and then at Shangxing. "Now that you've grown up, you have some tricks up your sleeve. Not bad. Since when did you have such strength?" Shang Xing's lips quivered as he spoke. "I only obtained it a while ago." Shang Bang smiled, looked down at the Feng family, and said, "Let her go. For Ruping's sake, I won't make things difficult for your Feng family." Shang Bang. Feng Yongxian's eyes were bloodshot as he said, "Shang Bang, it's all your fault, you despicable scoundrel. You must have deceived Ruping. If that's what you want to think, then so be it," Shang Bang said indifferently. Wang Luo sighed. "Back then, I still thought highly of Feng Xiaoqing. I thought that the Feng family was very strong. But now, it seems that they're all people with rusty brains. I've already said that strength is the most important thing in this world, but they're still immersed in their past as a human king's family. How sad." The old man seemed to have lost all his energy, and his voice had become hoarse. "Hee, that's great, my Feng family has indeed declined." Then, he took out a token. He smiled and said, "I also want to know if the human king's order is still useful. Why don't I activate the human king's order and see if the other aristocratic families and experts who respect the human king's family will come out to deal with you, Shang Bang?" Shang Bang's expression turned slightly cold as he said, "Is your Feng family trying to stir up internal strife in the face of a great calamity? I, Shang Bang, would like to see what the difference is between me and the human king of that year." The old man was silent. At this moment, in the forbidden area of the Feng family's back mountain, a powerful aura erupted. Flames burst forth, and a crimson phoenix rose into the sky before flying over. In midair, it transformed into a beautiful woman. She looked at Shang with a gentle gaze. "My son, you have suffered." Feng Yongxian's expression changed. Hey, I allowed myself to be imprisoned by the Feng family to return the favor. From now on, the Feng family has nothing to do with me." Feng Ruping looked at Feng Yongxian, and then at the old man. Was it worth it? The Feng family elders were all at a loss. Seeing Feng Ruping come out, Wang Luo shook his head. He retracted the ball of blood-colored spiritual energy and handed it to Hua Xiang. "Send it to the northern region. We don't need it here." Hua Xiang looked at Shangxing briefly, and then took the blood ball and left. Shangxing looked at Feng Ruping in a daze. Scenes of his childhood surfaced in his mind. At this moment, he did not know what to feel. Feng Ruping looked at Shang Bang with a bit of anger. "Is this how you treated my son?" "I had no choice," Shang Bang said helplessly. "I didn't want to attract the attention of the Feng family. Given my situation, I couldn't handle them." HMPH. Feng Ruping snorted coldly. Wang Luo shook his head and allowed Shangxing and his mother to reunite, while he walked toward Shang Bang. "You're a step away from surpassing the divine realm," he said. "My young friend, you're extraordinary," Shang Bang said with a smile. "Master taught me well." "Who is your master?" Shang Bang was very curious about the identity of Wang Luo and Shang Xing's master. He had to be a terrifying expert. Don't ask. You only need to know that my master can exterminate tens of thousands of you with a single breath. Xiang Bang chuckled, not hiding his suspicion. I know you don't believe me, but that's not important. Let me give you a kind reminder. Don't always focus on scheming. Otherwise, you won't progress. Wang Luo shook his head. The realm above the divine realm is the Dao realm. Your half-step Dao realm is really nothing. After he spoke, he walked towards Feng Xiaoqing, who was in the crowd. He did not seem to be afraid of the Feng clan's experts. Frowning, Xiang Bang glanced at Shang Xing, who was reunited with his mother, and fell into a state of deep thought. Wanna chat? Wang Luo looked at Feng Xiaoqing and asked. All right, he said. Feng Xiaoqing nodded and led Wang Luo into the Feng family's territory. Feng Yongxian sent a brief glance their way, but did not say anything in the end. The old man had yet to recover from the blow. Chapter 325, Ghost Beasts, Transformation of the Blood Fiend Race. In the Feng family's residence, Feng Xiaoqing looked at Wang Luo with a complicated expression. Back in the northern zone and the southern region, he had been shocked by Wang Luo and the others. After all these years, their strength had already advanced past his. He, Feng Xiaoqing, was inferior to them. The Feng family's burden was too heavy. No matter how high-spirited and talented he seemed on the outside, the family's expectations for him to surpass others weighed down upon him constantly, stifling him. Furthermore, his achievements mattered not in their efforts to save their ancestor. I can save your family's ancestor. I'm not lying to you. Wang Luo got straight to the point. Wang Luo had his own plans to save Feng Kong. The latter was once a human king. Even if he was defeated and almost died, he was still a Dao realm existence. Every human king was a shockingly talented person. If Feng Kong could survive, he would definitely be able to lead the cultivators of the southern zone to fight against the Blood Fiend race. If he saved Feng Kong, he would also have a share of the fate that Feng Kong fought for amidst the calamity. Furthermore, he still had to go to the Starry Sky Palace in the central zone to complete the old Pill King's request. The Starry Sky Palace was an ancient faction, and he did not know what kind of grudge the old Pill King had with the Starry Sky Palace. This required the aid of experts. He did not want to trouble his master, so Feng Kong was a good alternative choice. Wang Luo knew his own limits. Within this short period of time, he would not be able to break through to the Dao realm. Now that the great Daoyuan calamity had begun, there would be too many variables present for him to risk trying to break through to the Dao realm. If they were not careful, even the Starry Sky Palace would be destroyed in the great calamity, much less him. Therefore, Wang Luo was prepared to fight for fate and raise his strength to the divine realm before heading to the central zone. Not only was Feng Kong a Dao realm expert, but he was also a human king. He would be of great assistance. Feng Xiaoqing was silent for a moment before he said bitterly, I do trust you, Brother Wang, but I can't make the decision. Then are you allowed to visit your family's ancestor? Yes, I am. Feng Xiaoqing nodded. As the most outstanding descendant of the Feng family of this generation, or even of several generations, he had been instilled with the belief that the family had to save Feng Kong since he was young. He had seen the slumbering ancestor more than once. Then there's no problem. Wang Luo took out a small bottle and handed it to Feng Xiaoqing. The medicinal pill inside can wake up your patriarch, but it can't heal him. After your patriarch awakens, tell him to look for me. Feng Xiaoqing took the bottle and nodded. All right. Wang Luo, on the other hand, was surprised and asked, aren't you worried that I'll harm your ancestor? Feng Xiaoqing smiled. The burden is too heavy. It's a good thing to be able to let it go, no matter how. If Brother Wang really wants to harm our ancestor, you should be prepared to be hunted down by the Feng family. I just want to be rid of this burden. If the old ancestor is really saved, I will also be able to unload my burden. Wang Luo nodded. Feng Xiaoqing's words made sense. It seemed that his belief in saving his ancestor was not very strong. The great Daoyuan calamity is both a calamity and an opportunity. Brother Feng, make good use of it. Wang Luo waved his hand and left. Feng Xiaoqing looked at Wang Luo's back as he left. He held the bottle in his hand and walked toward the forbidden area in the back mountain. The experts of the family were all outside. Now was the best time to see the ancestor and save him. Otherwise, those old fogies would not allow him to feed the ancestor medicine so casually. Outside the Feng family's residence, Shangxing and Feng Ruping had been reunited. However, they had been separated for a long time, so they still felt a little distant. Saving Feng Ruping was only his responsibility as a son. Now that she had been rescued, Shangxing had resolved his filial responsibility as a son. It was time for him to enter the calamity and fight for fate. As for Shang Bang, he had complicated feelings for his father. I'm going to the northern region, Shangxing said in a deep voice. Mother will accompany you, Feng Ruping said softly. There's no need, I'm going to enter the calamity and fight for fate. Shangxing refused. He looked at Shang Bang, who was walking over, and said with a complicated expression, all that scheming was to surpass the bottleneck of the divine realm. What a pity, you were one step short. After a moment of silence, Shang Bang said, you can't be successful without suffering. Among your brothers and sisters, I value you the most. I had planned to ask the Feng family for the fire element cultivation method and the Feng family's secret technique after I broke through. I didn't expect you to encounter another opportunity. Whether Shang Bang was telling the truth or not, it did not matter to Shang Gan. I'm born with the fiery bones physique, not the fire element physique, Shangxing corrected him. If you want to truly surpass the divine realm, this calamity is your opportunity. It's up to you to make the most of it. Shangxing did not continue. He turned into a streak of light and flew away, disappearing into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Feng Ruping glared at Shang Bang and said angrily, it's all your fault for treating my son so badly. Pampering him would only have turned him into a wastrel. Shang Bang chuckled, you wanted to return the favor to the Feng family, and you've already done so. Let's go. He turned back to look at the Feng family and sighed. Fengkan, what a pity. The northern region of the southern zone. After Shangxing and Wang Luo arrived, they began to activate the Great Formation to block the invasion of the Blood Fiend race, weakening and thinning the blood-colored spiritual energy. Chu Zan was still thinking about the reincarnation cycle. The northern zone was changing, so were the Ghost and Buddha worlds. From time to time, a cloud of ghostly spiritual energy would emerge from the river of Styx and float out, transforming into ghostly creatures that did not look like humans. Instead, they came in a variety of shapes and forms. The only thing they had in common was that they had ghostly bodies and belonged to the ghost race. These new life forms were weak, like wild beasts. They could be called the wild beasts of the ghost world. There were ghosts by the river of Styx, capturing these wild beasts for food. They can be called ghost beasts, Chu Zan muttered to himself. These ghost beasts were formed from the reincarnation Tao law of the heavenly Tao. They were reincarnated from the dead creatures of the northern zone and were reborn in the river of Styx. Due to the incompleteness of the reincarnation Tao law, after transferring the dead creatures into the river of Styx, there was a lack of channels and bridges for reincarnation. This needed time to be perfected, and would have to wait until his reincarnation Tao principle evolved into a nascent great Tao principle. Chu Zan began to focus on tempering and improving the reincarnation Tao law, as well as the advancement of the heavenly Tao talisman plan. The central region of the western zone. Ding Yu and Xiao Liang led the human cultivators to fight against the blood fiend race. At the same time, they continuously weakened the blood-colored spiritual energy. However, there was so much blood-colored spiritual energy, so the progress almost seemed negligible. The blood fiend race had started to focus on nurturing their geniuses. Now that both sides had entered a stalemate, the scale and frequency of the battles had reduced. The main battle was concentrated between the geniuses of the two sides. Chu Zan noticed the changes in the blood fiend race. The blood fiend race of the western zone was beginning to develop and evolve into a true intelligent race. Soon, they would be able to compete with the other races for fate and vie for the position of an overlord race of the 9 zones. Perhaps the blood fiend race had already discovered the essence of the great Daoyuan calamity. Chapter 326, Keeping Steady. The blood fiend race was born in the ancient battlefields, created from the resentment of dead creatures. By right, they should have been mindless creatures with nothing but violence on their minds. However, the blood fiend race had changed. It was as if there was a force in the dark changing the blood fiends, guiding them onto a set path. For that reason, Chu Zan sensed something unusual. Could it be that someone is plotting something behind the scenes? As soon as this thought appeared, Chu Zan was filled with a sense of crisis. If there was really someone plotting behind the scenes, that person was definitely terrifying if they could influence the blood fiend race. It was most likely a Daoyuan realm expert too. In fact, even Hong Yuanchu and Mo Tu could not interfere with the calamity-bearing race so directly. I have to remain steadfast and not make any impulsive moves. Chu Zan took a deep breath. The heavenly Tao talisman plan was his priority. Whoever was plotting things behind the scenes had probably set up a trap for others. Does this person only have an influence on the blood fiend race in the Western Zone or the entire 9 zones? Chu Zan was on full alert. If that person could only influence the blood fiends in the Western Zone, it was still acceptable. However, if their influence stretched to the entire 9 zones, that would be terrifying. It meant that the other party could interfere with the Great Daoyuan calamity itself. What kind of terrifying power was needed to interfere with the Great Daoyuan calamity? Hong Yuanchu and the others definitely did not have the ability to do so. With his current strength, it was likely that he would not be able to defeat this expert. Looking at the Eastern, Southern, Chaos, Buddhist and Monster zones, Chu Zan made a decision. He could not delay the Heavenly Dao Talisman plan. He needed to improve his strength as soon as possible. In order to quickly push forward the plan without being noticed, he could only rely on his disciples. Using the fate that the disciples had seized from the calamity as a guide, he would be able to use the Heavenly Dao laws to devour the laws of heaven and earth. Chu Zan pondered for a while and felt that it was feasible. Before he became strong, he had to be stable and cautious. As Chu Zan thought of this, a Dao principle wrapped around him. The stable Dao principle. He took out the myriad heavenly mirror and gave each disciple a heavenly Dao seal. The heavenly Dao seal would be able to use his disciples' fate to devour the laws of heaven and earth, and would also allow his disciples to use a portion of the power of the heavenly Dao laws. With the support of the heavenly Dao laws, they would enter the calamity and fight for fate, which in turn would strengthen the heavenly Dao laws. Chu Zan stayed in his small courtyard and did not interfere with the outside world to avoid being detected by the person behind the scenes. The expansion and improvement of the heavenly Dao laws would be left to the disciples. Chu Zan was very confident in his disciples. In the entire 9 zones, there were not many who could compare to them. Ji Dexin was a special existence, to the point that even Chu Zan felt that he was unusual. The calamity was getting more and more intense, especially in the Western Zone. Even Ding Yu and Xiao Liang felt the strain. It was getting harder and harder to defeat the Blood Fiend race's geniuses. The Blood Fiend race was in the midst of transformation, and they were constantly improving their ability to revive. The battle in the Eastern Zone was also very intense. The Blood Fiends kept appearing, and the entire Eastern Zone was overflowing with Blood Fiends. Chu Zan did not interfere too much. Other than the Northern Zone, he did not actively purify or expel the blood-colored spiritual energy in the other regions under the Heavenly Dao laws. Chu Zan stayed in the courtyard, refining the reincarnation Dao law while perfecting the reincarnation cycle. With the appearance of blood fiends everywhere, Chu Zan realized that, apart from the blood fiends of the Western Zone, the blood fiends elsewhere were not transforming. From this, he was certain that the blood fiend race in the Western Zone was being controlled by someone. Chu Zan heaved a sigh of relief. This person's influence did not extend to the entire 9 zones. It seemed that the other party seemed to want to use the Western Zone as a foundation to expand into the other zones. Apart from the Northern Zone, the only other peaceful inhabited zone was the Central Zone. Chu Zan sensed that the atmosphere in the Central Zone was not quite right. It was likely that the Blood Fiend race would soon descend upon the Central Zone. The moment the Blood Fiend race appeared in the Central Zone would also be the time when the Heavenly Dao laws established a foundation in the Central Zone. Qian Ming also had a Heavenly Dao seal on him, so Chu Zan would not need to take action personally. The Heavenly Dao laws would act on their own initiative to infiltrate the laws of heaven and earth there. He Yu was in the Chaos Zone. Chu Zan was very confident in He Yu. She was knowledgeable, had an extraordinary background, and possessed outstanding abilities. Furthermore, she was a meticulous planner. Her plan was already in motion in the Chaos Zone. In addition, the ghost race had expanded very quickly and had already spread everywhere. As the Ghost Clan race, they left traces of the Heavenly Dao in various places, providing a foundation for its infiltration. The Buddhist zone was still in a stalemate. However, the Buddhists were gradually gaining the upper hand. Chu Pingfan and Yuer had already set off for the Eastern Zone. Chu Zan kept an eye on the Daoyuan group, especially Mo Tu and Mo Zan. He found that they were all very well behaved. Once they knew how terrifying the mysterious Great Calamity was, they shifted their focus away from the 9 zones. Any interference was regarded as a sign or effect of the calamity. Yi Yujun was still uncontactable. Could it be that he was trapped? Chu Zan was puzzled. Yi Yujun was a creature of the Great Dao and was extremely powerful. In terms of strength, he was actually stronger than Hong Yuanchu and Mo Tu. What was that strange black power? Was it the source of the Great Dao calamity? Chu Zan was helpless. He could not enter the Great Tao, and even if he could, he would not mess with the strange black power. Moreover, he was still cooped up in the courtyard. Even if he entered the Great Tao, he could only stay where he was. The Great Tao was invisible, but also omnipresent. As long as he stayed where he was, he would not be judged to have left the small courtyard. After all, the Great Tao was omnipresent, and the small courtyard was also where the Great Tao was. Chapter 327, The Mysterious Mastermind. Western Zone, Northern Region. The entire region was covered in blood-colored spiritual energy. Even the plants were stained with a touch of blood. Countless blood fiends populated the northern region. The northern region had fallen, and many living beings had become food for the blood fiends. The humans who had not escaped in time were being kept in captivity as a food source. The dense blood-colored spiritual energy provided the foundation for blood fiends' revival and strengthening. Within the thick blood-colored spiritual energy, every blood fiend's strength was slowly increasing. When they died, the living beings who were lucky enough to escape with their souls had all become ghosts. However, the blood-colored spiritual energy was too terrifying, and even the ghosts were not willing to stay any longer. There was nothing of value left in the northern region. The ghost race was spread all over the 9 zones, but they did not care about the northern region. The blood fiends would not turn into ghosts upon death, and none of their belongings were beneficial to the ghost race. Thanks to this, the ghost race had given up on the northern region. Occasionally, they would enter, but only ghosts with average strength who wandered around the periphery of the northern region. In the depths of the northern region, a special ancient battlefield emerged. Different from the other ancient battlefields, this ancient battlefield seemed to be a supreme treasure and not just a piece of land. Unlike the other ancient battlefields, which were filled with blood lakes and blood fiends, this ancient battlefield was filled with a faint grayish-black aura. At first glance, this aura unknowingly made one feel fear, as if there was a great horror hidden within it that wanted to devour people. The black ancient battlefield was quietly surrounded by the blood fiends, and grayish-black aura bubbled and rolled. In the middle of the battlefield was a black stone house. The door was closed, and no one knew what was inside. On both sides of the stone house, there was a strange black tree with twisted and mottled branches. It was about 30 meters tall, and black and red fruits the size of a thumb hung on the tree. Amidst the faint, grayish-black aura, 2 blood fiends with bulging muscles were walking toward the black stone house. When they saw the black and red fruits on the 2 strange trees outside the stone house, their eyes revealed a look of desire and excitement. Plop! The 2 blood fiends knelt in front of the stone house. They were very respectful. After kowtowing, they waited, motionless. Pa! 2 fruits fell from the strange tree and landed in front of the 2 blood fiends. Thank you for your gift, Lord. After the 2 blood fiends kowtowed and thanked him, they excitedly picked up the fruits and swallowed them. Their bodies were suffused with the faint grayish-black aura, as well as an aura of bloodlust. Their bodies seemed to be undergoing some kind of transformation, and their intelligence improved even further. The 2 blood fiends were extremely excited. This was what living was truly like. Previously, they had just been mindless beasts, but this expert had given them the opportunity to progress further. An indescribable voice came from the stone house. Can you occupy the western zone? Reporting to the Lord, no, we can't. The 2 blood fiends prostrated themselves on the ground and spoke carefully, afraid of angering the unknown existence in the stone house. The human race has heaven's blessed who are very strong. We don't have the advantage for the time being. Don't worry, Lord, we've already started to nurture our own heavens blessed. We'll definitely conquer the western zone. After the 2 blood fiends finished speaking, they prostrated themselves on the ground and did not dare to move. The stone house was silent for a long time before murmurs could be heard. Human, a lowly race with weak bodies and short lifespans, actually managed to become stronger. The existence in the stone house seemed surprised by the rise of the human race. My lord, the human race is now the overlord race of the 9 zones, one of the blood fiends said. There was no sound coming from the stone house. After a long while, the existence said, even if we can't take over the western zone, we have to protect the northern zone. Yes, my lord. The 2 blood fiends heaved a sigh of relief. The expert did not blame them for their incompetence. The 9 zones are about to change. If you do well, yours will be the next overlord race. A wisp of the grayish-black aura floated out of the stone house and formed a mysterious rune, imprinting itself on the foreheads of the 2 blood fiends. Cultivate this technique well. Yes, my lord. The 2 blood fiends were extremely excited. A technique bestowed by an expert would definitely be incomparably powerful. Don't advance rashly, wait for the right time. The voice came from the stone house, and then it went silent. Yes, my lord, the two blood fiends replied. They knelt on the ground for a long time. When no other instructions were forthcoming, the two blood fiends then stood up, bowed, and left the mysterious ancient battlefield. Western Zone. Ding Yu and Xiao Liang were sitting together. There's something wrong with the blood fiend race of the Western Zone, Xiao Liang said in a deep voice. Such a transformation should not have happened to the blood fiend race. Could it be that the first blood fiend race to descend upon the 9 zones is special? Ding Yu speculated with a frown. Maybe. Xiao Liang was not sure. Then, the two of them began to discuss their next course of action. Although the situation has stabilized, we have no way of taking back the northern region. On the other hand, the southern region and eastern region still have some pockets of human resistance. Perhaps we can start there, Xiao Liang suggested. Let's go to the southern region. We will launch a counterattack there, Ding Yu thought for a moment and said. The Western Zone was a little special as it was under the control of the Heavenly Tao laws. If they could take back the southern region, they could connect it to the western region. Tell Yu Shu and the rest to guard the central region. We will lead a group of people to try and retake the southern region. The southern region had just fallen, and most of the humans had evacuated. Furthermore, it was a good distance away from the Blood Fiend race's headquarters in the northern region. Therefore, the blood-colored spiritual energy here was still rather thin. Most of the Blood Fiend race's forces were tied down at the central region, so there was definitely an opportunity to retake the southern region. However, whether or not they could hold on to it was another question altogether. What Ding Yu and Xiao Liang wanted to achieve was to allow the Heavenly Tao laws to infiltrate the southern region. As long as that objective was achieved, their plan would be considered a success. Furthermore, taking back the southern region, even for a short period of time, had its benefits. The southern region had fallen too quickly and most of the resources had not been transferred yet. They could take the opportunity to transfer all of the remaining resources there to the central region. After the two finished their discussion, they began to execute their plan. Ding Yu and Xiao Liang set out from the central region. The Heavenly Tao seals absorbed some of the Heavenly Tao law's powers to assist them. The counterattack went smoothly. There were not many blood fiends left behind in the southern region, so whatever was remaining there were quickly killed. At the same time, the Heavenly Tao laws spread into the southern region through the Heavenly Tao seal. Chapter 328, Feng Kong Awakens. Your disciples, Ding Yu and Xiao Liang, attacked the Blood Fiend race with the power of the Heavenly Tao laws and achieved a great victory. Your Heavenly Tao laws have devoured a wisp of the great Tao Yuan's calamities aura. Your Fate Tao principle advanced. The system's reward suddenly arrived. The Heavenly Tao laws had actually devoured a wisp of the great Tao Yuan calamities aura, strengthening the laws. He examined the Heavenly Tao talisman and discovered that the Heavenly Tao laws had spread from the western region to the southern region of the Western Zone. After taking over the southern region, Ding Yu and Xiao Liang separated. Ding Yu was in charge of the southern region, threatening the Blood Fiend race in the eastern region. Xiao Liang, on the other hand, returned to the central region to defend the central region's main camp from the Blood Fiend army. Not bad, they're quite capable. Chu Zan nodded in satisfaction. As expected of his strongest disciples. The two of them had already reached the peak of the Heaven Realm, and were on the verge of reaching the Divine Realm. Their cultivation levels skyrocketed thanks to their achievements during the Great Tao Yuan calamity. It truly was a time of opportunity. Even Hong Yuanchu had reached the Tao Yuan realm during a Great Tao Yuan calamity. The Great Tao Yuan calamity had yet to reach its most intense stage. As it developed, Chu Zan believed that there would be Tao realm cultivators entering the calamity to fight for fate. However, after the Great Tao Yuan calamity, the Great Tao calamity would descend. There was hardly any time to catch his breath. There was still no news of Yi Yujun. He did not know what was going on. Chu Zan turned his attention to the other disciples. Heiyu's arrangements in the Chaos Zone had yet to come to fruition, and she had yet to fight for fate during the Great Tao Yuan calamity. Still, Chu Zan was very confident in her abilities. She was the kind of person who planned the big picture and made a killing in one fell swoop. Once her plan bore fruit, the rewards would definitely be extraordinary. Although Qin Ying was an unnamed disciple, his strength was also extraordinary. He was worthy of his fame as the great Qin Emperor. With the backing of the Luo family, Qin Ying made full use of his potential in this life. Most of the forces in the eastern zone were under his control, including the heavens blessed of the various factions. His forces constantly besieged the Blood Fiend race and weakened their ability to revive. They mobilized all kinds of resources and set up large formations and restrictions. The calamity within the eastern zone had been stabilized for the time being, and there were no signs of further deterioration. Meanwhile, Shangxing and Wang Luo were in the southern region. Hu Tianya was laying low, waiting for an opportunity to turn the tide. Qianming was also still hiding, waiting for an opportunity. Chu Zan had a feeling that the Great Daoyuan calamity was not so simple. Southern Zone. In the forbidden area within the Feng family's back mountain, Feng Xiaoqing arrived at the core of the forbidden area. In a small crystal house, a majestic man sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. He was in a state of deep sleep. Upon closer inspection, one would realize that the man's body was not made of flesh and blood. It was a divine soul. The human king Feng Kong. This crystal house was the treasure of the human king Feng Kong. Even the Feng family did not know the origin of this crystal house. The crystal house was Feng Kong's trump card. According to the information passed down in the Feng family, before the battle, Feng Kong had secretly told his descendants that if he died, there was no need to panic. They just had to come to this crystal house to find him. He had left a trace of his divine soul in the crystal house. No one had thought that Feng Kong would really die, and that the backup he left behind would also suffer a blow. This remnant divine soul had only woken up once, and had been sleeping ever since. That terrifying enemy was too powerful. Not only did he kill Feng Kong, but his attack also wounded Feng Kong's divine soul in the crystal house. Were it not for the special properties of the crystal house, Feng Kong's divine soul would have died on the spot as well. In contrast, the contingency plans prepared by the Demon King and Monster King had failed, and they had died. Feng Xiaoqing looked at the person in the crystal house. This was the ancestor who had led the Feng family to rise up. He was also the last human king of the human race. He had once created a legend, but he had also lost miserably. He was the one who had the most miserable ending among all of the human kings. For him, the Feng family had sacrificed so many geniuses just to resurrect him. Feng Xiaoqing had been instilled with the same belief since he was young. He had always lived a very tired life. Any peerless heavens blessed would want to live their own life and not carry the burden of their predecessors. As such, he could understand Feng Ruping's actions. If he had the chance, he would do the same. He had headed to the southern region of the northern zone to fight for the fate treasures, not for himself, but rather to increase the chances of saving their ancestor. As for using the fate treasures on himself, that would never be allowed. In the end, he failed. He had encountered someone even more monstrous than him. Feng Xiaoqing took out the pill that Wang Luo gave him and pressed it against the crystal house, which started to absorb its medicinal efficacy. Feng Xiaoqing's heart was beating rapidly in his mouth. He stared at Feng Kong. It was time for him, Feng Xiaoqing, to truly make a living for himself. He would die without regrets. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. Feng Kong, who was in the crystal house, did not change at all. Feng Xiaoqing felt a little disappointed. Wang Luo's pill did not seem to work. Just as he was about to leave, the crystal house suddenly shook. Feng Xiaoqing stopped in his tracks. The crystal house trembled and started to shrink. The divine soul in the crystal house opened its eyes. There was a flash of light. The crystal house was in the hands of Feng Kong's divine soul, which was looking at him. He really woke up. Feng Xiaoqing pays his respects to the ancestor. Feng Xiaoqing was momentarily stunned before he hurriedly bowed. How long have I been sleeping? Feng Kong asked calmly. I don't know. Feng Xiaoqing shook his head. This pill is extraordinary. Where did you get it? Feng Kong continued to ask. Feng Xiaoqing did not hide anything and told Feng Kong everything. Feng Kong was silent for a long time after hearing this. In the end, he sighed. Why did they go so far? I've made things difficult for my descendants. I need to borrow your body. Feng Kong's soul flickered, and then entered the crystal house. The crystal house then entered Feng Xiaoqing's soul. Feng Xiaoqing was very nervous. He was afraid that Feng Kong would take over his body. Chapter 329, Jade Crystal Palace. Don't be nervous. No matter how useless I am, I won't take over my descendants' bodies. Feng Kong laughed softly. I've embarrassed myself in front of the ancestor. Feng Xiaoqing smiled awkwardly. He relaxed his mind, and his body was temporarily under Feng Kong's control. Feng Kong controlled Feng Xiaoqing's body and brought him to the Feng family's hall. Looking at the current Feng family, His heart was filled with emotion. All of you, come. The voice was Feng Kong's. All of the elders of the Feng family were present. They were all shocked to see Feng Xiaoqing. Then, they saw Feng Kong emerge from Feng Xiaoqing's body. Ancestor, you've recovered. The Feng family elders were excited. The ancestor had awakened. Feng Kong glanced at the elders present. He did not recognize any of them. Could it be that his descendants had all died? Tell me about the current 9 zones and how many years have passed. The old man knelt on the ground in excitement. Great-grandson pays his respects to the ancestor. The 9 zones are currently in turmoil. He told Feng Kong everything he knew, especially about the Great Daoyuan calamity. Great Daoyuan calamity. Feng Kong's expression was complicated. He was once the human king of the southern zone as well as the ruling human king of the entire human race. However, who would have thought that Kingslayer would appear out of nowhere? Now, when he reawakened, it was during the Great Daoyuan calamity. Enter the calamity. Every descendant of the Feng family should enter the calamity. Protect the human race, protect the southern zone, and rise up during this calamity, Feng Kong ordered. Then, he returned to Feng Xiaoqing's body and said, go find our young friend Wang Luo. I can only be considered to have awakened, and can't last long in this state. Yes, ancestor. Feng Xiaoqing agreed. After bidding farewell to the family elders, he left the Feng family and headed to the southern zone's northern region to seek out Wang Luo. Chu Zan tried to contact Yi Yujun again, but failed to receive a reply. Were it not for Yi Yujun's aura in the Origin Dao crystal, he would have suspected that the latter had died. However, Yi Yujun was a 10-winged hell-devouring rock, so he was not too worried. As long as the darkness did not disappear, the latter would not die. He was mainly curious about what the strange black power on the Great Dao was. Chu Zan once again examined the fate of the 9 zones. He found that the spiritual energy activity of the 9 zones had become more and more chaotic, and that its fate was covered in a fog, which meant that the Great Daoyuan calamity was about to enter a new stage. He looked at the western zone. In the western zone, the western region and the central region had been taken over by the heavenly Dao laws. The southern region had already been infiltrated, but it would take some time before the heavenly Dao laws fully devoured the laws of heaven and earth there. However, the northern region of the western zone was very unusual. Everything was covered in a fog that seemed to block his senses, and its fate seemed to be ever-changing. There was indeed someone at work controlling the blood fiend race there. He had to be more careful. Suddenly, his expression changed. Feng Kong had awakened. Wang Luo was going to save Feng Kong. Chu Zan took out the myriad heavenly mirror and connected it to Wang Luo to check on Feng Kong's state and strength. At this moment, Feng Kong was in Wang Luo's residence, sitting cross-legged in front of a pill cauldron. Wang Luo was healing Feng Kong's injuries by refining pills. Shang Xing, Feng Xiaoqing, and Hua Ziying were watching from the side. Hua Ziying was shocked. This was the legendary Feng family's human king. Chu Zan took a look. Feng Kong was a first-level Dao realm cultivator. His speculation had been correct. Those human, monster and demon kings back then were all cultivators who had just entered the Dao realm. Feng Kong only had a remnant of his original soul, which was being constantly weakened by Kingslayer's killing intent. Were it not for the protection of his supreme treasure, he would have died a long time ago. Kingslayer's extreme Dao of slaughter was indeed powerful and unique. Even Feng Kong's original soul that had been hidden away could not escape his killing intent. The Monster King and Demon King back then had probably done the same, but lacked a supreme treasure. Only Feng Kong managed to survive. Feng Kong is quite extraordinary. It's a great fortune and an opportunity for him to awaken during this Great Daoyuan calamity. If nothing unexpected happens, he will be able to use this opportunity to rise up. The crystal house was extraordinary. It was definitely a supreme treasure, yet somewhat different from the supreme treasures of the 9 zones. It might not even be an item of this era. In order to save Feng Kong and help him to recover completely, one needed to extract the killing intent in his soul. Without that, Feng Kong's cultivation and lifespan would be affected, as he would need to constantly suppress and wear down that killing intent. Kingslayer was stronger than him, and an extreme Dao cultivator to boot, so it was impossible for Feng Kong to extract it himself, even with Wang Luo's help. Naturally, Feng Kong knew that as well. However, as long as Wang Luo could help him recover sufficiently, he was confident that he could suppress the killing intent with the crystal house. Chu Zan looked on silently, thinking about whether he should make Feng Kong one of his own. Perhaps, with his help, he could try to investigate who the hidden expert was. Feng Kong could disrupt some of the latter's plans to gauge his response and thereby gain some information. The more Chu Zan looked, the more he felt that the crystal house in Feng Kong's soul was extraordinary. It seemed that Feng Kong did not really understand the use of the crystal house. The crystal house was indeed a treasure, but Chu Zan was not moved by it. After all, he had many treasures stronger than the crystal house. He was just curious. His intuition told him that the crystal house had an extraordinary origin. Heavenly Secrets Origin Probing Technique. Chu Zan immediately used the Heavenly Secrets Origin Probing Technique to investigate the crystal house's origin. The Jade Crystal Palace, the seclusion room of the celestial race's supreme saint founder in the 8th Great Tao era. It was nurtured for an entire Daoyuan during the Great Tao era. It contains the remnants of the celestial race's supreme saint's celestial power. It was left in the 9 zones during the Great Tao calamity. It is in a dormant state and has suffered some damage. Good fellow. Chu Zan was really surprised. Feng Kong was really a guy with great fortune. Of course, his luck was also really bad. After obtaining such a treasure, he should have been a protagonist, but he was crushed by Kingslayer instead. However, his luck had been better than the demon and monster kings. Had he not been attacked by Kingslayer, Feng Kong would probably have somehow activated the Jade Crystal Palace and obtained the remaining celestial power of the Supreme Saint and his inheritance. According to how things should progress, when Feng Kong rose up again, he would seek out Kingslayer to seek revenge. That would not do. Kingslayer was now his loyal follower. How could Chu Zan allow him to be killed? Feng Kong would likely not let go of the grudge either. Chu Zan decided to take Feng Kong in. As for the grudge between him and Kingslayer, that would be a matter for the future. It would not be easy for Feng Kong to catch up to Kingslayer's cultivation level. As long as Kingslayer was stronger than him, the two sides would not fight to the death. It was actually very easy to deceive Kingslayer into not looking for trouble with Feng Kong. Moreover, given Kingslayer's arrogance, he would not go after someone he had already defeated. After making his decision, Chu Zan decided to appear. With Feng Kong's current strength, he had a great advantage in the early stages of the Great Daoyuan calamity. Chapter 330, Saving Feng Kong. Wang Luo was currently healing Feng Kong's injuries. Feng Kong's injuries were too severe, exceeding his expectations. The pill that he had prepared was unable to heal Feng Kong completely, so he had to think of another way. Fortunately, Feng Kong was once a human king, so he still had some heavenly treasures. Otherwise, Wang Luo would be helpless. Feng Kong's soul was gradually recovering. After his soul recovered, Kingslayer's killing intent was also revealed. Wang Luo and the others' expressions changed. Don't panic, it's the killing intent in my body. I'll suppress it, Feng Kong said helplessly. How many years had it been? This killing intent had not been obliterated or dissipated despite the long passage of time. When he thought about the Kingslayer, he felt angry, but also a little helpless. Kingslayer was too powerful. Wang Luo threw some heavenly treasures into the pill cauldron while frowning. This won't do. If you don't get rid of this killing intent, even if you recover, you will still be affected. As long as I recover, I will be able to get rid of it after some time, Feng Kong said. However, what he lacked the most now was time. Normally, he would enter closed-door cultivation for 100 or 1,000 years to get rid of this killing intent. However, he was currently in the middle of the Great Daoyuan calamity, and every second was precious. Even after Senior Feng Kong has recovered, you still can't erase this killing intent. Shang Xing asked curiously. After all, Feng Kong was a human king, an existence that had surpassed the divine realm. Why could he not even erase a trace of this killing intent? Feng Kong seemed a little weak. Feng Kong felt sorrowful. Back then, he was a peerless expert, but now, even the younger generation was doubting his strength. This is not an ordinary killing intent, but extreme Dao killing intent. It's different. Sighing deeply, he said, back then, I was stronger than the monster and demon kings, but I was still no match for that person's extreme Dao of slaughter. Feng Kong did not continue. The extreme Dao of slaughter was too terrifying. If he did not have this supreme treasure, he would not have survived. Wang Luo and Shang Xing nodded. The two of them thought of Chu Pingfan. Although he did not cultivate the extreme Dao of slaughter, he still cultivated an extreme Dao. Both of them understood the strength and uniqueness of the extreme Dao. Senior Feng Kong, if you want to recover to your peak and dispel that killing intent, I'm afraid you can only seek my master's help, Wang Luo hesitated for a moment before saying. Feng Kong remained silent for a moment. Wang Luo and Shang Xing's master had to be a peerless expert, an existence even stronger than himself at his peak. Perhaps he was once a human king as well. What are the conditions required to seek your master's help? Feng Kong asked. The great Daoyuan calamity was ongoing. If he did not recover to his peak, how could make the most of this opportunity? Furthermore, he might even perish. The former human kings had probably all gone to that mysterious place. Whether or not they would return was unknown. As the former human king, he also wanted to return to his peak and lead the human race to the peak. Perhaps he could continue to increase his cultivation level during this calamity, which might give him the opportunity to settle the score with Kingslayer. He was familiar with Kingslayer. Back then, he, Feng Kong, was upright, unparalleled in power, and respected as the human king. As for Kingslayer, he was quirky, bloodthirsty, and had a bad reputation. However, Kingslayer was still a human after all, so Feng Kong had once advised him not to kill human cultivators but monster and demon race cultivators instead. Kingslayer then indeed went over to challenge the monster and demon race cultivators. However, after dealing with them, he came back to challenge Feng Kong. At that time, Feng Kong realized that something was wrong. Kingslayer's cultivation had most likely deviated, so he had left a wisp of his soul in the crystal house. Then, he fought Kingslayer. His original intention was to stop Kingslayer, but if the latter did not come to his senses, then Feng Kong would be left with no choice but to kill him to prevent him from slaughtering countless other human cultivators. However, Kingslayer proved to be terrifyingly strong, and he had lost. When he died, Feng Kong had been very pessimistic about the future of the human race. If he died, the demon race would definitely take the opportunity to invade, and no one would be able to restrain the demon king. Kingslayer had gone mad and would definitely not help the human race. It was only now that Feng Kong realized that Kingslayer had killed the other two kings as well, resulting in the 9 zones becoming kingless. However, it was no use dwelling on the past. Feng Kong only wanted to recover now. Even if he had to lower his head to seek help, he would do it. It depends on master's mood. The conditions shouldn't be important. Wang Luo thought for a moment and said, perhaps Senior Feng would need to become master's disciple and run errands for him. Feng Kong was speechless. He was once the human king, but he could only be an errand boy. Feng Kong's face showed signs of struggle. He was the human king, how could he run errands for someone else? Would that not make him the most miserable one among the human kings? My master is unfathomable. In his eyes, Dao realm cultivators are just ants, Wang Luo said solemnly. Feng Kong remained silent. After a long while, he gritted his teeth and asked, can I meet your master? All right, I'll contact my master. Wang Luo nodded. Just as he was about to contact Chu Zan, he saw a halo with ripples appear. Feng Kong's expression changed. Just as he was about to say something, Wang Luo and Shang Xing hurriedly bowed. Greetings, master. Hua Xiang was already prostrating herself on the ground. Feng Xiaoqing's heart was not calm. He hurriedly bowed to welcome this expert. Feng Kong raised his head and saw an indescribable figure shrouded in a 7-colored divine light. This person did not reveal his aura, but he still gave off a terrifying feeling. Greetings, senior. Feng Kong hurriedly bowed. Chu Zan glanced at him. It's fate that we met. You died at the hands of Kingslayer and survived until now. It's also fate and destiny that you met me. He has gone astray on the path of the extreme Tao of slaughter, but I have already helped him to correct his mistake. The grudge between you two shall be resolved by yourselves. Feng Kong's heart trembled. Senior is. Could this terrifying senior be Kingslayer's master? I'm not his teacher. It's just that he was fated to join my Tao cultivation group. Chu Zan raised his hand and pointed. A ray of light surged forth and entered Feng Kong's body. In an instant, the killing intent inside Feng Kong's body disappeared. Feng Kong's divine soul trembled, and traces of flesh and blood began to form. After just a short while, he had recovered his physical body. Although his strength had not yet recovered to its peak, he would only need to cultivate for a few days to return to his peak. Many thanks, senior. Feng Kong was extremely excited. He had finally come back to life. He hurriedly thanked Chu Zan. If senior has any instructions, Feng Kong will go through fire and water to complete them. Chu Zan was satisfied with Feng Kong's attitude and said, you were once the human king and have contributed to the human race. I will not be harsh with you. If you are willing, you can become my follower. If you are not willing, you can do 3 things for me. Chapter 331, Dao Realm Follower. Feng Kong was conflicted. Become a follower. He was once the human king, and there were countless people who hoped to become his followers, but now, he was being asked to follow someone else. If he did not want to become a follower, he needed to do 3 things, which seemed simple on the surface. However, how could the 3 things requested by a supreme expert be simple? Don't worry, Chuzan continued, these 3 things will not be beyond your capabilities. He gave the choice to Feng Kong. Whether or not he could grasp the opportunity would depend on Feng Kong. If Feng Kong chose the second option, Chuzan would not be disappointed. He could only chalk it up to a lack of faith between himself and Feng Kong. If Feng Kong chose to become his follower, it would be his opportunity, and it was inevitable that he would rise up during this great Daoyuan calamity. 3 things that would not be beyond his ability. Feng Kong was confident that he could complete them. However, he was struggling in his heart. If he chose to do 3 things, would he miss out on an opportunity? This senior was clearly extremely powerful. Could he really become such an expert? Could he really catch up to Kingslayer? Could he really rely on himself to rise up and reach a higher realm? If he had not suffered defeat at the hands of Kingslayer, Feng Kong would naturally be very confident. He would definitely reject the first option and choose to do 3 things. However, after suffering and being beaten, Feng Kong was no longer as arrogant or as blindly confident. After a long while, Feng Kong took a deep breath and made his decision. Although I, Feng Kong, was a human king, I am also the one who failed. I am grateful to Senior for giving me a new life. I, Feng Kong, am willing to become Senior's follower. Chuzan was pleased. Feng Kong lowering his status was a good start. Since he had made this decision, he would naturally give him some guidance. A force swept and separated Wang Luo and the others to allow Chuzan to converse privately with Feng Kong. You won't regret this choice. Our sect doesn't have a name. You can just call it, following your heart. Yes, thank you, my lord. Feng Kong chose to address Chuzan as, Lord. He could not bring himself to call him master. Chuzan was not bothered by this. You have just entered the Dao realm. How much do you know about it? My lord, I broke through the shackles of the divine realm and entered the Dao realm not long ago. I don't know much about this realm, but before I died, something seemed to be attracting me to go somewhere, Feng Kong said after thinking for a while. Chuzan was not surprised by this. As expected, after breaking through to the Dao realm, one would be summoned by the primordial land. Feng Kong was filled with anticipation. He did not know much about the Dao realm and now this expert was going to guide him. This way, he could avoid many detours. The Dao realm is divided into 36 levels. To advance, you must refine your Dao principles, comprehend new ones, and perfect the old ones. Chuzan passed on the knowledge of the Dao realm to Feng Kong, all the way up to the Daoyuan realm. There are only a few who can make it to the Daoyuan realm. Many are stuck at the 36 levels of the Dao realm. You still have a long way to go. Feng Kong's heart trembled. He was even more glad that he had made the right choice. Otherwise, how would he have known the secrets of the Dao realm? How would he know the secret to reaching the Daoyuan realm? This supreme expert had to be a Daoyuan expert himself. Otherwise, how could he be so familiar with the 36 levels? Feng Kong now had a clear direction for his cultivation. He was no longer confused and did not need to muddle his way through. You are being drawn to the primordial land, which is in the desolate ancient zone. It is said that it is the origin of the 9 zones and the place closest to the Great Dao. Now that the Great Daoyuan calamity has arrived, Dao realm cultivators will also enter the calamity. You should seize this opportunity and increase your strength. Yes, my lord, Feng Kong replied respectfully. Chuzan waved his hand and a wisp of chaotic energy was transferred to Feng Kong. At the same time, he gave Feng Kong a heavenly Dao seal. Feng Kong would definitely enter the calamity to fight for fate, which was exactly what Chuzan required of him. Given Feng Kong's current strength, in the 9 zones, he was almost invincible. His participation would naturally speed up the expansion of the heavenly Dao laws. As for the wisp of chaotic energy, that was to help Feng Kong refine his Dao principles and quickly increase his cultivation level. He could not allow his followers to be weak. This is chaotic energy. It can refine Dao principles and speed up the transformation of your Dao principles. Feng Kong excitedly received the wisp of chaotic energy. This was a precious treasure. Many thanks, my lord. Feng Kong was extremely grateful. He had condensed the fire Dao principle, which was still weak at the moment. After absorbing the chaotic energy, he could clearly feel that the fire Dao principle had become stronger. Not only that, his physical body was also becoming stronger. Chuzan continued, the Jade Crystal Palace in your soul is of extraordinary origin. Take good care of it. If you can activate it, you will obtain something good. Jade Crystal Palace. The Crystal House. Feng Tong took out the Jade Crystal Palace and held it in his palm. He asked in confusion, My lord, I found this Jade Crystal Palace by chance when I was traveling the desolate ancient zone. Although it's somewhat magical, I've never been able to find out its exact purpose or use. It's the secret cultivation room of a person who reached the Daoyuan realm a long time ago. It's naturally extraordinary. You should spend some time examining and comprehending it. When the time is right, it will be activated. Chuzan did not make it too clear. He had his suspicions that this Jade Crystal Palace had not been left behind by accident. Perhaps the celestial race wanted to leave an inheritance in the 9 zones. No matter what the purpose behind it was, since it was in Feng Tong's hands, then the secret inside would eventually be inherited by Feng Tong. Yes, my lord. Chuzan also talked about the great Daoyuan calamity and the blood fiend race, while reminding Feng Tong that he could quickly rise up by fighting for fate during the calamity. In the past, the powerful cultivators of the human race rose to power during the great Daoyuan calamity and led the human race to become the overlords of the 9 zones. Feng Tong's heart was surging with emotions. His chance to rise up had come. He would exterminate the blood fiend race, fight for fate during the calamity, and rise up. Chuzan ended his private chat with Feng Tong, after which he encouraged Wang Luo and Shang Xing, and then deactivated the myriad heavenly mirror. Chapter 332. The Human King Suppresses the Blood Fiends. After Chuzan gave Feng Tong some advice, he redirected his attention back to the reincarnation cycle. Ever since Chuzan found out that there was a hidden expert in the Western Zone manipulating the blood fiend race, he kept a low profile and no longer interfered with the situation in the Western Zone. Ding Yu and Xiao Liang were fighting with the blood fiend race in the Western Zone. Occasionally, they would also borrow the power of the heavenly Dao laws. Chuzan did not stop them. The current heavenly Dao laws were similar to the laws of heaven and earth. Even if Ding Yu and Xiao Liang borrowed the power of the heavenly Dao, they would only be mistaken for borrowing the power of the laws of heaven and earth. The children of fate naturally inherited part of the fate of the 9 zones, and could thus borrow the power of the laws of heaven and earth. Presumably, no one would be able to tell the difference. Moreover, Chuzan believed that the hidden expert could not interfere directly with the great Daoyuan calamity, which was why he had chosen to act secretly. A month passed. Su Shaner could not sit still any longer and ran off to find He Yu. Chuzan did not object to this. One more person fighting for fate in the calamity meant one more reward for him. Your disciple, Ding Yu, has fought for fate during the great Daoyuan calamity and reached the divine realm. Your Fate Dao principle has advanced, and you have received a lump of chaotic energy. Ding Yu had broken through to the divine realm. The calamity was full of opportunities, but also dangers. For every cultivator that rose up, countless others fell. In the northern region of the southern zone, Wang Luo and Shang Xing made their moves. They continuously set up large formations to refine the blood fiend race. The other regions in the southern zone were also under attack from the blood fiend race. The great Daoyuan calamity was in full swing. In the eastern region of the southern zone, Shangbang killed the blood fiends one by one. Not only did he kill them, but he also purified the blood-colored spiritual energy. His strength was beyond imagination. Shangbang kept killing and purifying the blood fiends. Although they were numerous, he had at least stopped them from spreading. Can't you just go to the northern region and look after our son? Feng Ruping asked worriedly. There are opportunities for him in the northern region. You don't have to worry about him. Shangbang could sense that the more blood fiends he killed, the closer he was to truly breaking through the shackles of the divine realm and reaching a new realm. Boom! Suddenly, an ancient battlefield descended upon the eastern region. This ancient battlefield seemed to have been dyed blood red. Roar! 2 huge blood fiends charged over. Shangbang's expression turned extremely solemn. The strength of these 2 blood fiends was no weaker than his. They were half-step Dao realm blood fiends. Be careful. After warning Feng Ruping, Shangbang went up to meet them. The countless cultivators of the eastern region also charged forward with him. A great battle broke out, and the blood-colored spiritual energy became more and more intense. Feng Ruping looked at Shangbang with a worried expression. Although he was powerful, the 2 blood fiends were also extremely powerful. If he could not kill them completely, once the 2 blood fiends revived and fused, an even stronger blood fiend would emerge. This time, blood fiends arrived with great momentum and, As they fell in great numbers, they revived and came back stronger. Retreat. Set up a defensive perimeter. Xiang Bang ordered. It was also very difficult for him to resist those two blood fiends. He could not kill and purify them at the same time. As such, if they died, they would fuse with each other, and might even give birth to a Dao realm blood fiend. If that was the case, who could stop that blood fiend? The eastern region's forces began to retreat and continued to build a large defensive formation. As they continued to kill, more and more cultivators died, and they could not purify the blood-colored spiritual energy in time. The blood fiends became stronger and stronger. Xiang Bang, retreat quickly. Feng Ruping called out anxiously. Xiang Bang was helpless. If he did not stop the two blood fiends, no one in the entire eastern region, or even the southern zone, could stop them. He could not retreat. Even though he was already injured, he could not retreat. At this moment, the sky turned red, and a huge flaming phoenix appeared. The phoenix seemed to have a tangible form. The flames were condensed and did not dissipate. He could not even sense the temperature within. However, wherever the phoenix flew by, the blood fiends would evaporate. In an instant, the field was cleared. The phoenix then flew toward the two blood fiends. Xiang Bang hurriedly retreated. His expression changed drastically. The power of this phoenix was beyond his imagination. It was far stronger than he was. When the phoenix appeared, everyone's first thought was that it belonged to the human king's Feng family. Since when did the Feng family have such an expert? The two blood fiends were completely defenseless in front of the phoenix. They quickly melted away and disappeared. The gap between them and the Dao realm was immense. However, even a Dao realm expert could not purify so many blood fiends. Moreover, this was the great Daoyuan calamity, and changes could happen at the drop of a hat. As more blood fiends were killed, new ones would appear. The phoenix dissipated, and a figure appeared in its place. Ancestor. Feng Ruping was shocked. Xiang Bang was shocked. The human king Fengkong. He had recovered. Was this the might of a human king? He had thought that he was only a step away, but now he realized that step was a very large one. Fengkong turned to look at Feng Ruping and nodded with a smile. I, Fengkong, hereby issue the human king's order today. All human cultivators must put aside old grudges and work together to resist the great Daoyuan calamity. He shouted loudly. The 9 zones will eventually become the 9 zones of the human race. The cultivators present were momentarily stunned, but after they recovered, they started shouting excitedly. As your majesty commands. Everyone was extremely excited. It was the human king, Fengkong. A legendary existence. Fengkong's figure once again transformed into a huge phoenix, charging directly toward the blood-red ancient battlefield. Boom! The ancient battlefield trembled and a battle broke out. Not long after, Fengkong returned and sealed the ancient battlefield with his Dao aura, preventing the blood fiends from reviving. After leaving the eastern region, Fengkong went to the western region, the southern region, and then the central region. Wherever he went, he massacred the blood fiends. Fengkong's sudden appearance shook the entire southern zone. The heavenly Dao laws also seeped into the various regions of the southern zone. Chu Zan was very satisfied with Fengkong. The expansion of the heavenly Dao laws had been accelerated. Fengkong was preparing to head to the western zone. But Chu Zan stopped him. The time had not come yet. He did not want to alert the hidden expert right now. Moreover, with Fengkong's appearance, the blood fiend race in the southern zone had been suppressed. However, they were a calamity-bearing race, which meant that something else would definitely help them to turn the tides of battle. Thus, if Fengkong left the southern zone, there would be no one around to deal with those new threats. Chapter 333, The Rise of the Ghost Race. Just as Chu Zan had expected, not long after Fengkong killed the blood fiends, the shadow of a terrifying ancient battlefield appeared in the central region of the southern zone. Fengkong had no choice but to head over. Cultivators everywhere were fighting the blood fiend race. However, they were endless. Your disciple, Xiao Liang, has obtained great fortune and reached the divine realm. Your Fate Dao principle has advanced, and you have received a lump of chaotic energy. Xiao Liang broke through to the divine realm not long after Ding Yu. 2/3 of the southern region of the western zone had already been incorporated into the heavenly Dao laws, and some headway had been made into the eastern region as well. Everything was going smoothly. Chu Zan was waiting for the harvest. A month later, your disciples, Wang Luo and Shang Xing, have completely refined the blood-colored spiritual energy in the northern region of the southern zone. At the same time, they refined treasures from the blood-colored spiritual energy and fought for fate amidst the great Daoyuan calamity. Their fates have transformed and their cultivation has reached the divine realm. You have been rewarded with 2 advancements of your fate Tao principle and 2 lumps of chaotic energy. Chu Zan was stunned. Wang Luo and Shangxing were going all out. They had broken through to the divine realm as well. Also, what was the meaning behind the transformation of their fates? Chu Zan looked toward the northern region of the southern zone. The power of fate there had already changed. It seemed to herald the arrival of the great Tao. Wang Luo and Shangxing had completely refined the blood-colored spiritual energy in the northern region and refined it into a blood fiend supreme treasure. They had become the first people to truly defeat the blood fiends. Therefore, their fates were transformed, and it appeared that they had been rewarded by the great Tao because of this, resulting in their breakthrough to the divine realm. Chu Zan then turned his attention to He Yu, wondering when she would reap the harvest of her planning. The heavenly Tao laws took this opportunity to expand rapidly in the northern region of the southern zone. Your heavenly Tao laws have taken control of the northern region of the southern zone. You have been rewarded with a cultivation level advancement. 16th level of the Tao realm. As expected, a cheat-like system was far better than any cultivation-boosting treasure. Chu Zan continued to stay in the courtyard. In the 9 zones, it was chaos. There was war and death everywhere. Even Feng Kong was being held back in the central region of the southern zone for the time being. The eastern zone was also in trouble, as more and more blood fiends appeared. The effect of Qin Ying's initial strategy was gradually losing its edge. Fortunately, under Qin Ying's leadership, they had made all kinds of preparations in advance. Thus, the eastern zone was able to stabilize the situation. The chaos zone and monster zone were both in turmoil as well. A year passed. Over the years, the Great Tao Communication Group gained many more Tao Realm participants from the varying races of the 9 zones. Now, the number of participants in the Great Tao Communication Group was close to 100. Chu Zan currently did not have any thoughts of expanding the group. He no longer needed to use the Origin Tao Crystal to increase the speed of his cultivation. He was focused on expanding the heavenly Tao laws and reaching the Taoyuan realm as soon as possible. Another year passed. The 9 zones became increasingly chaotic, and despite Chu Zan's increased mastery of the Fate Tao principle, he failed to peek into the secrets of the 9 zones, fate. As the ancient battlefields continued to descend, the 9 zones began to expand. Perhaps once all of the ancient battlefields had descended, the 9 zones would return to their original size. That moment would likely herald the peak and turning point of the Great Taoyuan calamity as well. The ghost race you created has become famous throughout the 9 zones. The Fengdu Ghost King broke through the shackles of the divine realm and reached the Tao realm. The Ghost Tao principle has advanced and the ghost world has expanded. His fate has transformed dramatically. Your reincarnation Tao principle has advanced. The system's reward suddenly arrived. Chu Zan was stunned. The Fengdu Ghost King reached the Tao realm. Clearly, he had obtained a great opportunity during the Great Taoyuan calamity. The ghost race had risen. Chu Zan examined the ghost race's situation. Yuer had already broken through to the heaven realm. There were already more than 10 divine realm ghosts. The ghost race had finally become a force to be reckoned with in the 9 zones. Furthermore, everyone now knew about their existence, as well as the fact that they themselves could become ghosts upon death, so long as their divine souls escaped. Since the ghost world was still unable to automatically absorb the souls of the dead, the ghosts still needed to personally deliver these souls to the river of Styx to be transformed. For this reason, the ghost race had set up branches in every zone and region to receive these souls, which fueled the expansion of the ghost race. Naturally, there were also some problems. For example, conflicts due to the previous identity of different races before they turned into ghosts. Chu Zan did not interfere. The ghost world possessed the Ghost Tao principle, which every ghost would cultivate. With time, these problems would be resolved naturally. Besides, a powerful race would naturally have all sorts of problems, and these ghosts would all possess some lingering attachments to their previous lives. Even the Buddhist clan had its fair share of problems. As time passed, new factions within the clan had formed. However, just like how all ghosts were still ghosts no matter what their identity was in their previous lives, all Buddhist factions were still Buddhists in essence. While the other zones were in chaos, the northern zone was at peace. There were no blood fiends, and any ancient battlefields that descended were just treasure troves for the northern zone's cultivators. Cultivation here became easier and easier, and comprehending the heavenly Tao laws also became easier. Chu Zan was looking forward to the northern zone producing a Tao realm cultivator. The significance of the heavenly Tao laws producing a Tao realm cultivator was immeasurable. As time passed, however, some of the northern zone's cultivators could no longer sit still. These cultivators headed to the outer zones to enter the calamity, whether it was to help the human race or to fight for fate. Everyone was trying to lure them out to reinforce the other zones. Chapter 334. The Great Daoyuan Calamity in the Central Zone. Central Zone, Qian Region. Qianming had been cultivating diligently this entire time. At the same time, he paid close attention to the changes happening in the Central Zone, preparing for the calamity. In recent days, the situation in the Qian region had become tense. There was an inexplicable feeling of oppression in the air, as if something big was about to happen. All of the cultivators who had reached the heaven realm could sense this. They were troubled, realizing that the Great Daoyuan calamity was about to descend upon the Central Zone. As the core zone of the human race, the Central Zone had the most and strongest experts, as well as numerous ancient factions. However, they had not sent any experts to reinforce the Western Zone or the other human zones. The fundamental reason was that they were preparing to deal with the Great Daoyuan calamity in the Central Zone. The Ji family and some other ancient forces formed an alliance, which included all the powerful cultivators and geniuses of the Central Zone. At the same time, all of the major forces and cultivators were instructed to obey the Alliance's orders. After killing a few disobedient geniuses and forces, the Alliance's orders became absolute. While the cultivators and forces were still free to do their own thing, whenever the Alliance issued an order, it had to be obeyed unquestioningly. This was done to allow the entire Central Zone to work together to deal with the Great Daoyuan calamity, and to secure the safety and future of the human race. Ji Dexin, the young master of the Ji family, was powerful and domineering. Furthermore, no genius from any other ancient force could compete with him. Thus, he naturally became the leader of the Alliance's geniuses. Even the experts from the older generation had to respect him. After all, he had broken through to the divine realm and surpassed many of them. He also had the support of the Ji family and a few other ancient forces, which meant that he was the Alliance's leader in all but name. Although Qianming kept a low profile, he was also listed among the heavens blessed in the Qian region, so naturally, he was also included in this group. However, he kept his head down and chose not to bring attention to himself in the Alliance. He was waiting for an opportunity. The Great Daoyuan calamity would soon descend upon the Central Zone. As such, the Alliance organized a conference to discuss how to deal with the Great Daoyuan calamity. It was a discussion in name, but in reality, it was simply organized to communicate Ji Dexin's plan. Qianming did not participate. However, since barely anyone knew him, his non-participation did not attract any attention. Some people did not even know that he was part of the Alliance. Boom! The heavens shook as the sky turned red. This was not taking place in just a single region, but the entirety of the Central Zone. Even the laws of heaven and earth seemed to be contaminated by the blood-red aura. The descent of the calamity upon the Central Zone was more terrifying than expected. In an instant, it enveloped the entire Central Zone. The experts of the Alliances gathered with grave expressions on their faces. The Alliance's orders were set up, and everyone got to work setting up countless formations. The human army was also put on high alert. The legions of cultivators formed by the Alliance were spread across the 10 regions of the Central Zone. There were experts from the ancient forces stationed in each region, acting as army commanders. Qianming stood on a mountaintop. Behind him were the sect's cultivators, who were now all under his command. He raised his head and looked at the sky with a grave expression. The blood fiends in the other zones had all descended from the ancient battlefields. Could it be that the first wave of blood fiends in the Central Zone was about to descend from the sky? At this moment, the laws of heaven and earth of the Central Zone seemed incredibly fragile, putting the fate of the human race at risk. As the son of fate of the Qian region, Qianming naturally felt these changes. If the Central Zone could not withstand this calamity, as the core zone of the human race, the fate of the entire human race would be greatly affected. Spread out and set up the formation, Qianming ordered. The cultivators of the sect spread out and got to work, setting up large formations. The army of cultivators behind him also formed up into battle formations. In ancient times, the human race relied on some of these battle formations to defeat stronger enemies and ascend to the position of overlord race. Now that the Great Daoyuan calamity had descended, these battle formations would once again play an important role in the war. In the small courtyard, Chu Zan turned his attention to the Central Zone. What he saw was a blood-red sky. His expression turned serious. Something was wrong with the central zone. The great Daoyuan calamity here was too terrifying. He could sense how fragile the central zone's laws of heaven and earth were. It seemed as if a huge hole would be ripped apart at any moment. The opportunity for the heavenly Dao laws to infiltrate the central zone had undoubtedly arrived. Qianming is in the Qian region. When the time is right, Qianming's heavenly Dao seal can guide the heavenly Dao laws to infiltrate the laws of heaven and earth there. This was an unprecedented opportunity, and Chu Zan did not want to miss it, so he ordered the Fengdu Ghost King and Yuer to select a group of ghost experts to hide in the central zone. Every ghost expert had a heavenly Dao seal. Unlike the heavenly Dao seals his disciples had, these were one-time use seals. Once activated, the heavenly Dao laws would enter the bodies of the ghost experts. When necessary, it could even refine ghost experts to strengthen the power of the heavenly Dao laws as they infiltrated the laws of heaven and earth. Dao Realm. Chu Zan was almost certain that the calamity descending upon the central zone would involve Dao Realm blood fiends. He just did not know how many. If the human race could not withstand it, then their fate would be at risk, and the entire human race would be in danger of declining during this great Daoyuan calamity. There should be Dao Realm old guys hiding within those ancient forces, right? Chu Zan was not sure. However, the human race would definitely be prepared for the great Daoyuan calamity. Those ancient forces were not to be trifled with. Throughout human history, there were many Dao Realm cultivators. However, many of them were unable to progress past the Dao Realm, and were probably concealing themselves within these ancient forces. In theory, as long as their Dao principles were not destroyed, the lifespan of a Dao Realm expert was limitless. Chu Zan patiently waited and observed. He wanted to see what would happen to the 9 zones once the great Daoyuan calamity descended upon the central zone. Would that hidden expert in the western zone make any new moves? Furthermore, Chu Zan was curious as to whether the sole remaining zone, the desolate ancient zone, would be affected by the great Daoyuan calamity. After all, the desolate ancient zone was a bit special. Still, his intuition told him that things would not be peaceful there either. At this moment, Hong Yuanchu was looking for him in the group chat. He looked rather anxious. Chapter 335, Blood from the Heavens. Chu Zan was surprised. Did Hong Yuanchu, who was one of the human race's ancestors, sense something unusual? Taoist brother Chu, what's going on with the great Daoyuan calamity of the 9 zones? Why is it developing so quickly? Everything is progressing much faster than the previous great Daoyuan calamities. Hong Yuanchu was clearly anxious. Also, what's going on with the human race? Why does it feel like the fate of the human race is at risk? He was one of the ancestors who had led the human race to become the overlord race. As such, the changes in the human race's fate did not escape his notice. Based on his experience, such a situation should not have occurred during the early stages of the Great Daoyuan calamity. During the Great Daoyuan calamity, Hong Yuanchu had used some means to observe the calamity and support the human race. As such, he could sense that there was something clearly wrong with this Great Daoyuan calamity, which made him feel uneasy. Could it be that the great calamity Chu Zan spoke of was starting to affect the human race as well? Chu Zan was stunned. Was the great Daoyuan calamity progressing too quickly? He did not know. After all, he had not personally experienced the previous great Daoyuan calamity. However, he did not doubt Hong Yuanchu's words. Was this related to the impending great Dao calamity? Chu Zan was unsure, but in order to prevent the Daoyuan and Dao realm cultivators in the desolate ancient zone from interfering with his plan, he had to come up with something to deceive them. Don't panic. This is all an illusion. The great calamity is coming. The great Daoyuan calamity is only a precursor to this, so it's not unusual for it to develop faster. The human race is blessed by the heavens and has a strong fate. There won't be any problems. It's just that you can't sense it clearly. He consoled Hong Yuanchu and the other human race cultivators. Some changes are happening in the 9 zones, he continued. Dao realm cultivators should not enter the 9 zones for the time being, no matter what seems to be happening there. Otherwise, there will be a huge calamity. If we aren't careful, the calamity might affect the primordial land, which we have to avoid. Hong Yuanchu was shocked. Would it affect the Daoyuan realm cultivators? They were not ready to face the great calamity yet. Since this matter concerned their lives, these Dao realm cultivators did not dare to be careless. They naturally restrained the Dao realm cultivators in the desolate ancient zone. After deceiving the Daoyuan and Dao realm cultivators, Chu Zan continued to focus on the central zone. At this moment, the sky above the central zone was turning redder and redder, and an oppressive aura filled the hearts of almost all of the cultivators of the central zone. Central Zone, Central Region, where the Alliance's headquarters was located. G. Dexon stood on a mountaintop and looked up at the sky, frowning slightly. The entire sky was dyed red. The signs of this great Daoyuan calamity were beyond his expectations. The great Daoyuan calamity shouldn't be like this. G. Dexon's eyes glowed with a mysterious light. He looked at the sky, as if he was trying to decipher something. However, all he saw was a mess. I'm afraid that this calamity is not ordinary. An old man walked over from behind. What do you think, Elder? G. Dexon looked at the old man respectfully. This old man was an expert from the older generation of the G family and had surpassed the divine realm. However, for some special reason, he was residing with the G family. He only came out of seclusion after the great Daoyuan calamity arrived. I can't see through it either. The G family elder shook his head and said, I'm afraid there will be Dao realm blood fiends. G. Dexon nodded and asked, Elder, you should be able to handle it, right? I hope so. The G family elder sighed. G. Dexon remained silent. You are the future of the G family. No matter what, you can't take too many risks. I know what needs to be done. I'll go look for those old guys and talk about countermeasures for this. The G family elder left. G. Dexon's body glowed with a divine light. His aura began to soar, and he looked more and more extraordinary. Furthermore, he was wearing a piece of divine and extraordinary armor, which was concealed from sight. Boom! The blood-red sky suddenly erupted. It was like boiling blood, bubbling and swirling. Then, blood fiends with bulging muscles and brutal auras descended from the sky. Assemble the battle formation. Kill. In the cultivator army, relying on the battle formations, the auras of the cultivator army condensed and were channeled through the battle formations, releasing a terrifying attack. They wanted to kill blood fiends before they landed. Boom! A terrifying blood-colored figure appeared in the sky, exuding an aura that had clearly surpassed the divine realm. It launched an attack, and even though the cultivator army had launched their strongest attack, they were still unable to defend themselves. In an instant, they were turned into a bloody mist that permeated the air. The great Daoyuan calamity had finally descended upon the central zone. It was also at this moment that the figures of the ghost race experts appeared in various regions of the central zone. The heavenly Dao seals on their bodies disappeared in the blink of an eye and disappeared into the shaking sky. A Dao realm blood fiend had descended, and wiped out 2 battle formations in an instant. Boom! 2 powerful auras charged into the sky and blocked the Dao realm blood fiend. A huge battle broke out in the sky. G. Dexon was floating in midair, surrounded by divine light. He issued a series of orders. All Heaven Realm cultivators, set up the divine battle formation to block and attack the blood fiend. All Supreme Realm cultivators, set up the Flying Dragon battle formation and get rid of the blood fiends on the ground. All Emperor Realm cultivators, set up the Starlight battle formation and protect the women and children. Anyone below the Emperor Realm is to enter the shelter. The human race rose up in the great Daoyuan calamity, and we will do the same during this great Daoyuan calamity. G. Dexon's voice was loud and clear as he sent out orders to all of the regions through communication talismans. Boom! Another Dao Realm blood fiend descended. 2 more Dao Realm cultivators charged into the sky and fought with it. G. Dexon pulled out a huge sword. The golden sword exuded a divine aura. He led the divine realm experts of the G family to kill the divine realm blood fiends. With a wave of the sword, divine light flashed and a blood fiend collapsed. Even the blood-colored spiritual energy was weakened wherever that divine light passed through. The G family's divine realm experts were not as powerful as him, but the power they used was similar to G. Dexon's. Their attacks also weakened the blood-colored spiritual energy to prevent the blood fiends from becoming stronger after revival. 2 Dao realm blood fiends had descended upon the central region, whereas in the Qian region, which was the second most powerful region, a single Dao realm blood fiend had descended. A Dao realm elder from an ancient force in the Qian region charged forward and began to fight it in the sky. Qian Ming stared at the sky and watched as the other blood fiends got closer and closer. His heavenly Dao seal had already flown up into the sky and successfully penetrated the laws of heaven and earth of the Qian region. Chapter 336, Qian Ming rises up. Qian Ming stared at the blood fiends that were falling from the sky, specifically at the heaven realm blood fiends. They were his target. The time had come. He wanted to rise up during this great Daoyuan calamity. Since his senior brothers had already taken action, it was time for him to follow in their footsteps. The geniuses of the Qian region all rushed up and fought in the sky. They fought with serious expressions, which turned solemn after they saw the blood fiends revive and become stronger after death. It was at this point that everyone truly realized how terrifying the blood fiends were. Some geniuses fell in battle. Others rose up while fighting and broke through to become stronger. Qianming stood at the peak of the mountain. His figure transformed and the entire mountain seemed to have become part of his body. Every blade of grass and tree seemed to be his weapon. His fellow sect cultivators all turned pale and ran away. Not far away, an expert from an ancient force looked at Qianming with shock. There was such a terrifying heavens blessed here. This genius strength had clearly surpassed the other heaven realm geniuses, yet he seemed to have only just reached the heaven realm. Qianming moved. His true body disappeared, but the mountain itself moved, soaring into the sky. Boom! The wind surrounding the mountain turned into sharp blades, and countless trees turned into all kinds of weapons. Flames surged, and an aura of destruction erupted. Everything a few dozen miles of the mountain turned into elements or weapons that fused into his attack. Heaven and Earth Myriad Transformation Technique. For the first time, Qianming displayed his power. Boom! The first blood fiend shattered, and the blood-colored spiritual energy that it turned into was cleansed, becoming thinner and thinner. Boom! Another blood fiend shattered. The mountain hurled itself into the descending blood fiends, obliterating them and cleansing the resulting blood-colored spiritual energy. Qianming's feats overshadowed countless geniuses from the Qian region, including the successors of the ancient forces. Killing heaven realm blood fiends seemed effortless to him. As the son of fate of the Qian region, Qianming's rise was inevitable. Your disciple, Qianming, shook the entire Qian region and rose to power. He fought for fate amidst the great Daoyuan calamity and his cultivation soared. Your fate Dao principle has advanced. Qianming has risen up. Chuzan was not surprised by this. After all, Qianming was the son of fate of the Qian region. Moreover, he was cultivating the heaven and earth myriad transformation technique, which Chuzan had handpicked for him. Among the disciples, Qianming was the most junior, and also the weakest. Now, thanks to the calamity, he was catching up with the others. Right now, only Qinying, Heiyu, Demon Buddha, and Hu Tianya had not achieved feats of greatness, but Chuzan believed that it would not be long before he reaped a harvest from them. They were, after all, his disciples. The battles in the central zone continued, bathing both the sky and the earth in blood. The humans were at an advantage, but the blood fiends were constantly getting stronger after revival. It was time for a new strategy. Formation experts and cultivators who practiced special cultivation techniques joined the army, constantly purifying the blood-colored spiritual energy to prevent the blood-colored spiritual energy from gathering together. The human race's fate was still unstable. The outcome of the battle had yet to be determined. The heavenly Tao laws were also quietly expanding. Boom! Another heaven realm blood fiend was killed by Qianming. Chuzan was worried about the situation in the central zone and frowned. He took out the myriad heavenly mirror and connected it to the Qian region where Qianming was. When the image projection appeared, what greeted his eyes was a sea of blood in the sky. The blood fiends looked like raindrops as they fell from the sky one after another. The human army continued to fight. Chuzan turned his attention to Qianming. His disciple had already reached the 5th level of the heaven realm. The stronger he became, the stronger his fate became. As he rose up, the Qian region's fate rose with him. Not far away, tens of thousands of cultivators were gathered together, combining their power to form a unique formation. Their combined attack swept away countless blood fiends, and even purified some of the blood-colored spiritual energy. The battle formation of the Heaven Realm cultivators was even more terrifying. A 100-man Heaven Realm battle formation could match a Divine Realm blood fiend. This was the power of the battle formations that had contributed to the rise of the human race back then. Even though they lacked top-notch cultivators in that era, they relied on these battle formations to fight the experts of the demon and monster race. The battle was extremely intense. Chuzan could sense that 2 regions of the central zone were on the verge of collapse. Deactivating the myriad heavenly mirror, Chuzan took out the heaven spying mirror and infused his Dao aura into it. The battle between the Dao realm experts was still ongoing. In the image projection, 2 human Dao realm experts were fighting against a Dao realm blood fiend. When Chuzan examined their cultivation, he realized that it was just as he expected. The Dao realm experts who had chosen to remain in the 9 zones all had issues with their cultivation. The entire central zone was in turmoil. The battle continued for a few days, but the blood-red sky did not relent. The blood fiends kept descending upon the human army, which was already starting to show signs of exhaustion. Shua. The two regions in danger suddenly received reinforcements. Some Divine Realm experts returned from the desolate ancient region and joined the battle. In any case, there was no lack of Divine Realm cultivators who were nearing the end of their lifespans. Chuzan observed the situation silently. He did not plan on interfering for the time being, as he wanted to avoid being targeted by the great Daoyuan calamity, as well as that hidden expert. He believed that the human race's foundation was not limited to this, and that their true trump cards would only be revealed when it became a crisis of existence. Qianming had already stopped fighting and was now recuperating, and the mountain he had used was currently in ruins after the battle. As he continued to fight for fate, his cultivation would soar, and soon enough, he would break through to the Divine Realm, possibly even before the first wave concluded. Chapter 337. The Reincarnation of a Half-Saint of the Celestial Race. Chuzan sighed. The great Daoyuan was indeed a golden opportunity for courageous cultivators to rise up. It was not unusual for cultivators to experience more than one breakthrough during or after a battle. Of course, to be able to make full use of this golden opportunity, these cultivators had to fight for fate, and be powerful enough to begin with. As long as the human race could withstand these attacks, they would experience an increase in strength. If they could not, then the human race would decline. Qianming once again joined in the battle. The blood-colored sky started to tremble and swirl, as if it was going to collapse. In the central region of the central zone, a crack suddenly appeared in the sky. A terrifying blood fiend descended. Dao Realm, not good. Countless experts from the ancient forces were shocked. Another Dao Realm blood fiend. Who could stop it? The Dao Realm experts of the human race were all already fighting. There were none left to engage this newcomer. A dozen peak Divine Realm experts gritted their teeth and charged into the sky, trying to stop the Dao Realm blood fiend. Even though they knew that they were no match for it, they did not have a choice. Among the people who attacked was the current head of the Ji family, Ji Tianbei. Dexin, retreat quickly. As long as Ji Dexin survived, the Ji family's legacy would be preserved. His talent far surpassed the other geniuses of the 9 zones, so he could not be allowed to fall here. However, Ji Dexin did not retreat. His body glowed with divine light. A suit of armor covered him, making him look even more extraordinary. Ji Dexin raised his sword and faced the Dao Realm blood fiend. What? Ji Tianbei and the other elders of the Ji family were all shocked. Dexin, you can't, retreat quickly. However, Ji Dexin turned a deaf ear to their cries. A divine light enveloped him as his figure shot into the sky. Through the heaven-spying mirror, Chuzan saw Ji Dexin rise into the sky to meet the Dao Realm blood fiend. That divine armor was extraordinary. Challenging a Dao Realm blood fiend. If he succeeded, Ji Dexin would be the biggest beneficiary of this wave of the calamity in the central zone. The divine light and the blood-red fiend collided, causing an explosion, after which the blood-colored spiritual energy dispersed. Within a radius of 100 miles, the sky was clear. The Dao Realm blood fiend had fallen. Ji Dexin's aura rose sharply, and the divine light around him grew stronger. A mysterious aura suddenly appeared and enveloped him. The blessing of the great Dao. Everyone was stunned. Ji Dexin had succeeded in challenging the Dao Realm blood fiend. What kind of monster was he? The elders of the Ji family were ecstatic. Many of the ancient forces were silent and fearful. Chuzan's expression turned serious. Divine Realm cultivators should have had no way of killing or resisting a Dao Realm cultivator. There was something wrong with Ji Dexin's armor and sword. When that Dao Realm blood fiend charged at Ji Dexin, it was annihilated by a divine light hidden in the armor. Ji Dexin's aura was growing stronger and stronger. He was now just a step away from the Dao Realm. Chuzan felt that Ji Dexin should have been able to reach the Dao Realm, but had instead suppressed the breakthrough. Was he planning to continue to fight for fate as a Divine Realm cultivator? This genius was definitely hiding a big secret. Heavenly Secret's origin probing technique. Ji Dexin possesses the fate of the great Dao, and is the reincarnation of a half-saint of the celestial race. He is the young master of the Ji family. Chuzan was stunned. A half-saint of the celestial race. Moreover, Ji Dexin was actually a person who possessed the fate of the great Dao. Was it because he had just been blessed by the great Dao, or was it because his original self was someone who had transcended the 9 zones? What was the cultivation level of a half-saint? Chuzan pondered for a moment. The Jade Crystal Palace was the cultivation abode of a saint of the celestial race, which was equivalent to Dao Yuan realm cultivation. As such, was a half-saint a 36th level Dao realm expert. Or was a half-saint a peak 36th level Dao realm expert who was just one step away from the Dao Yuan realm? It was no surprise then, that Ji Dexin was so extraordinary. However, why had Ji Dexin reincarnated into the human race? Was the celestial race planning something? Chu Zan could not help but think of that hidden expert in the western zone. Could he also be a member of the celestial race? However, judging by the sides they chose, that hidden expert was probably not from the celestial race. Perhaps that person was from the demon or monster race that had left the 9 zones. Were these races trying to return to the 9 zones? These were powerful races, so if they planned to return to the 9 zones, it would spell danger for Chu Zan. He had to reach the Dao Yuan realm as soon as possible. The future was uncertain, and only strength would be able to guarantee that he would be able to maintain his peaceful existence. Ji Dexin, interesting. Chu Zan narrowed his eyes. The Ji family was an ancient force with a long history. Ji Dexin probably reincarnated into the Ji family to take advantage of their status in the human race. What exactly was he planning? Chu Zan felt that he needed to understand the Ji family better. Hong Yuanchu was one of the ancestors who had led the human race to become an overlord race. However, there was no Hong family in the 9 zones. Did Hong Yuanchu leave behind an inheritance? If the Ji family had a Dao Yuan realm expert, would he or she be able to detect the abnormality with Ji Dexin? He could ask Hong Yuanchu about it. Chu Zan wanted to understand what kind of existence the Ji family's old ancestor was. Hong Yuanchu was definitely not the first Dao Yuan realm expert among the human race. In the human race's long history, even while they were suppressed by the other races, they should have had their fair share of experts. Chapter 338, Great Dao Calamity Aura. Ji Dexin's slaying of the Dao realm blood fiend meant that the human race had emerged victorious in this wave of the calamity in the central zone. The human race had survived. Although the battle was still going on, the human race had gained the upper hand, and the morale of the human race soared. However, the danger had not passed. There would be more waves as the calamity progressed, and things would not be finished until the great Dao Yuan calamity had concluded. Qianming was still in the battle. Although he was not as dazzling as Ji Dexin, he was one of the most outstanding geniuses in the central zone. As he continued to fight for fate amidst the calamity, he further solidified his position as the son of fate of the Qian region. If nothing expected happened, Qianming would reach the Dao realm by the end of this great Dao Yuan calamity. Chu Zan turned his attention away from the central zone. Now, in the entire 9 zones, other than the northern zone, only the desolate ancient zone was untouched by the blood fiend race. However, Chu Zan was certain that it would not remain this way. After a long journey, Ren Cheng finally reached the outer perimeter of the primordial land. Although it was still a distance away from the primordial land, there was a barrier that prevented his entry, so this was the best he could do. He began to prepare and set up things according to Chu Zan's instructions. Chu Zan then instructed Ren Cheng to return to the northern zone after completing his task. It was time for the heavenly Dao laws to give birth to a Dao realm expert. After the great Dao Yuan calamity descended upon the central zone, the 9 zones became more and more chaotic. The blood fiend race continued to wage war on the living beings of the 9 zones, wiping out many small races. The members of the Great Dao Communication Group also became active and talked about the changes they felt. For example, Ying Kong, who was the weakest among them, jumped out and said that he had been feeling uneasy recently and had a feeling that a great opportunity was waiting for him. Ying Kong was very scared. After hearing Chu Zan's previous words in the group, he did not even dare to exit his secluded cultivation, and did his best to suppress his urge and the calling to enter the calamity. Ying Kong was not the only one who felt this way. Some of the other members of the group also expressed that they were being tempted by this mysterious temptation. This was a sign that the Dao realm experts were about to enter calamity. Hong Yuanchu and the other Dao Yuan realm experts told them to stabilize their minds. At this critical moment, they remained calm. Hong Yuanchu and the others who had experienced the last great Dao Yuan calamity were solemn. The calamity was developing too quickly, and something was obviously wrong. How long has it been since the great Dao Yuan calamity started? Not even 100 years had passed, and yet the calamity was starting to tempt Dao realm experts into entering the calamity. This was dangerous, so they did their best to forbid any Dao realm cultivators in the desolate ancient zone from entering the calamity. Suddenly, Yi Yujun returned. Taoist brother Chu, it was so scary. I almost met my end. Chu Zan was shocked. What had happened? Yi Yujun was a creature of the great Tao. As long as darkness existed, he would too. How could he have almost died? What was that strange black power? Fellow Taoist Yi Yujun, what's going on? Yi Yujun's expression was solemn, and there was a trace of fear in his eyes. That strange black power is extremely terrifying. After I touched it, it began to corrode me. I resisted it while continuing to explore, but in the end, my entire body mutated. Yi Yujun continued fearfully, that strange black power is very ominous. After my body was corroded, I actually grew red feathers. Question mark question mark question mark. What the hell? You grew red feathers? Although Chu Zan was stunned, he realized that it was extremely unusual for a 10-winged hell-devouring rock to grow red feathers. What happened after that? Chu Zan asked curiously. Could it be that Yi Yujun was now a red rock? If that was the case, he would have his suspicions that the latter was transforming into a blood fiend. Creatures of the great Tao would not turn into blood fiends, would they? That would be truly terrifying. Of course I was happy at the beginning. After all, my feathers now had a new color. Yi Yujun sighed. I didn't pay much attention to it at first. After all, it was just an additional color, but as it progressed, half of my feathers became rainbow-colored. If that was the extent of it, it would have been fine, but the different colored feathers started to repel each other. I feel like something is wrong with my entire body. It was then that I realized that things were serious, and I did my best to expel the strange black power from my body. Chu Zan's expression also turned serious. When Yi Yujun tried to expel the corrosive strange black power, he encountered resistance. Despite his strength, he was actually unable to expel it from his body for a long time. He was so scared that he did not dare to stay around the strange black power. However, no matter where he turned, he was trapped by the strange black power. It was like a fog that surrounded him. Still, he was a powerful creature of the great Tao, so he eventually made it out. After that, he focused on expelling the strange black power from his body, which took even longer. This was the reason why Yi Yujun had suddenly disappeared without a trace. Fellow Taoist Yi Yujun, what do you think of the strange black power? Something that could corrode a creature of the great Tao was terrifying. Yi Yujun pondered for a long time before saying, I can sense the aura of calamity from that strange black power. It's ominous and inauspicious. I suspect it's the legendary great Tao calamity aura. Yi Yujun continued seriously, when I was born with an inheritance and legacy in my mind. Parts of this described the great Tao calamity aura, and how dangerous it was, even to Taoyuan realm experts. The great Tao calamity aura. This was definitely related to the great Tao calamity. Chapter 339, A Sense of Crisis. Chu Zan once again felt a sense of danger. If this aura started to spread, all living beings below the Taoyuan realm would die, and Taoyuan realm experts would have to fight for their lives. Furthermore, this was more terrifying because the great Tao was everywhere, and the great Tao calamity could strike anywhere. Taoist brother Chu, the appearance of the great Tao calamity aura should be related to the great Tao calamity you mentioned, right? Yi Yujun's expression turned serious. When he first heard about the great Tao calamity, he had not bothered with it, and neither did Huang Long and Gui Ran. After all, they were creatures of the great Tao and very special. Apart from being unable to leave the great Tao, they were basically immortal. As long as the great Tao was not destroyed, they would not die. However, after coming into contact with the great Tao calamity aura, he no longer thought that way. Even if they did not die, they would mutate into strange creatures. That was a fate worse than death. Even if they could recover in the future, how long would it take? Currently, there was only a small amount of that strange black power, but if it spread throughout the great Tao, where could they hide? At that time, they would not be spared from the great Tao calamity. In fact, no Taoyuan realm expert would be spared. After all, the Tao paths they had opened up were all connected to the great Tao. That's right, this is a sign of the great Tao calamity. Fellow Taoist Yi Yujun, please be vigilant. I have to prepare some countermeasures, Chu Zan said solemnly. All right, I'll be careful. Chu Zan ended his conversation with Yi Yujun and informed Huang Long and Gui Ran. These two creatures of the great Tao should also help him to keep an eye on things. Originally, Chu Zan had expected the great Tao calamity to be in the distant future. However, given the speed that the great Taoyuan calamity was developing, it was likely that the great Tao calamity would also arrive soon. Chu Zan took out the Chaos Dao mirror and infused his Dao aura into it, trying to deduce when the Great Dao Calamity would descend. However, he was met with strong resistance and failed. He then tried to deduce the end of the Great Dao Yuan Calamity, but also failed. This heightened his sense of danger. After trying a few methods of deduction, he failed to obtain any results. It was obvious that his cultivation level was restricting him. Chu Zan turned his gaze to the Chaos Zone. Heiyu was someone he had high hopes for, and he hoped she would surprise him. The Buddhist zone was still at a stalemate. For the time being, the heavenly Dao laws were unable to completely take over the Buddhist zone. Qin Ying was not making much progress in the eastern zone either. Chu Zan could only patiently wait and hope that his disciples would bring him a great harvest so that he could increase his cultivation level as soon as possible. The battle in the central zone was about to end. Thanks to Qianming's feats, the heavenly Dao laws had already devoured almost 2/3 of the laws of heaven and earth in the Qian region. Ji Dexin had taken complete control of the alliance. Almost all of the human forces in the central zone were under his command, and his reputation resounded throughout the central zone. He had the makings of a human king. If nothing unexpected happened, Ji Dexin would become the human king of the central zone during this calamity. He might even become the human king of the entire 9 zones. Ji Dexin was the reincarnation of a half-saint of the celestial race. What would he do when he became the human king? What was the future of the human race? Would he make the human race a vassal of the celestial race? The human experts would definitely not allow it, especially Hong Yuanchu. After all those hardships, he had finally led the human race to become an overlord race, so having the human race regress like that would be unacceptable. Or was Ji Dexin trying to accomplish what he did with the demon race and netherworld race and turn the human race into the celestial race? Chu Zan pondered for a moment. He could not let Ji Dexin be. There had to be a human heavens blessed who could compete with him. The 9 zones would be Chu Zan's territory in the future. He definitely could not allow it. However, none of the disciples could compare to Ji Dexin. Ding Yu could not. Qin Ying could not either. Not even Heiyu. Although Feng Kong was a human king, that was in the past. His current influence only extended to the southern zone. Furthermore, he was far inferior to Ji Dexin in terms of both fate and reputation. One was an old man, while the other was a peerless genius of the human race. Feng Kong's era had passed. Only the current heavens blessed of the human race could defeat Ji Dexin. For the time being, there was no one among his disciples who was on par with Ji Dexin. Chu Zan could only hope and wait for one of his disciples to rise up and compete with Ji Dexin. Chu Zan privately messaged Hong Yuanchu to ask him about the Ji family's ancestor. Was Ji Dexin's reincarnation in the Ji family approved by the ancestor of the Ji family? If the Ji family's ancestor had tacitly agreed, this meant that the Ji family's ancestor had probably come into contact with the celestial race. Fellow Taoist Hong, do you know of the human race's Ji family? Chu Zan had already established his image as a peerless expert and an old senior in the hearts of Hong Yuanchu and the others. There was no need to beat around the bush. Hong Yuanchu and the others would not be suspicious if he asked directly. The Ji family? Hong Yuanchu was taken aback. Why did Chu Zan suddenly ask about the Ji family? Could it be that the calamity affected the human race and the Ji family? The Ji family has a long history. While I was still a weak cultivator, I had already heard of the legend of the Ji family's human king. He was the human king when the human race was weak, and the one who strengthened the human race. Chu Zan did not expect the Ji family's heritage to be so vast that even Hong Yuanchu, who had been around for 2 Daoyuans, considered the Ji family's human king a legend. Do you know where the Ji family's human king is? Did he reach the Daoyuan realm? Hong Yuanchu thought for a moment and said, he must have reached the Daoyuan realm. It's just that he has disappeared for a long time and we have never seen him before. I have also asked the descendants of the Ji family, but they have no idea where he is either. When Chu Zan mentioned the Ji family's human king, Hong Yuanchu suddenly remembered that they were not the only Daoyuan realm experts among the human race. Where had those who had reached the Daoyuan realm before them gone? Chapter 340, Secrets of the Daoyuan Realm. Hong Yuanchu suddenly realized that although he was one of the people who led the human race to rise to become an overlord race of the 9 zones, the experts who had led the human race while they were weak, and established them as a strong race in the 9 zones, had all disappeared. Taoist brother Chu, I just remembered something. When I was about to open my Tao path, a demon expert tried to kill me, but an unknown human expert blocked him. I only had a quick glance at that time. Later on, I heard that the human expert who attacked was the son of the Ji family's human king, a Daoyuan realm expert. Chu Zan's expression became strange. Hong Yuanchu was a Daoyuan realm expert. Why was his memory so poor to the point that he only remembered this incident after being prompted? He had probably been affected by some sort of strange power, resulting in these memories fading into the back of his mind. After Hong Yuanchu finished speaking, he fell silent. He was not stupid, so he naturally realized that something was wrong. The strange power that affected his memories had probably been used on him before he opened his Dao path. Was it done by someone or something? If it was done by a person, that meant that he had long been targeted by a Daoyuan realm expert. And that expert was very likely to be a human. What was the other party's purpose in doing this? Hong Yuanchu's expression darkened. Which unparalleled expert was not prideful? He had led the human race to rise to power and become the overlord race of the 9 zones, yet he had fallen victim to some unknown expert without even realizing it. Taoist brother Chu, do you think it was done by someone, or? How would Chu Zan know? After all, his cultivation had yet to reach the Daoyuan realm. Whether it was done by someone or influenced by the laws of the great Tao, no one knew. Therefore, Chu Zan did not answer directly, but instead asked, fellow Taoist, do Mo Tu and the others know of the demon race's pioneers before them? Hong Yuanchu was stunned. That was a good question. Did Mo Tu know? If he did not, and part of his memories were lost too, then it was likely that it was not done by a human expert and perhaps instead the laws of the great Tao. Chu Zan continued to ask, is there a Daoyuan realm expert from the Ji family in the primordial land? Are there any Dao realm cultivators from the Ji family? Hong Yuanchu replied, we don't know how many Dao realm experts the Ji family has. If there is a Daoyuan realm expert who's hiding himself, we won't know unless he shows himself or leaves this place to head to the 9 zones. Chu Zan obtained new information from Hong Yuanchu's words. If there was a Daoyuan realm expert in the empty space above the primordial land, Hong Yuanchu and the others would have no way of knowing. Only when someone left that space would the others be able to sense their presence. The waters of the 9 zones indeed ran deep. Where did the Daoyuan realm experts before Hong Yuanchu and the others go? Why had Hong Yuanchu forgotten about this? Taoist brother Chu, why are you asking about the Ji family? Hong Yuanchu asked curiously. I found something interesting, so I was just casually asking. Hong Yuanchu tactfully stopped asking since Chu Zan did not elaborate. After chatting about the Ji family, Chu Zan ended his private chat with Hong Yuanchu. According to the information he had obtained from Hong Yuanchu, the Ji family had a long history. The Ji family's human king was one of the key figures that led the human race to establish themselves as a strong race. Although they were not as strong as the demon race and the monster race, they were able to hold their own. Then, in Hong Yuanchu's era, they rose up to become an overlord race of the 9 zones. Without a doubt, the Ji family's human king was a peerless genius, who managed to reach the Daoyuan realm despite the suppression of the demons and monsters. Furthermore, when Hong Yuanchu was about to open his Dao path, a Daoyuan realm expert that was suspected to be the son of the Ji family's human king saved him. This meant that the Ji family had more than one Daoyuan realm expert. However, both were missing. Clearly there was something unusual about this whole situation. He needed to pay more attention to Ji Dexin. The group chat started to become active. When Hong Yuanchu asked Mo Tu and Mo Zan about their predecessors, they were both shocked. Were it not for Hong Yuanchu's question, they would never have thought about this matter. It was as if there was a law that made them think that they were the first generation of Daoyuan realm experts among the demon race. Hence, in the group chat, Mo Tu and the other Daoyuan realm experts began to discuss this matter and the possible causes. If the human race, demon race, and monster race Daoyuan realm experts had all experienced this, then the possibility of it having been done by someone was very small. The other smaller races also jumped out, wondering if there had been other Daoyuan realm experts before them. Chu Zan observed their discussion and suddenly realized that he knew too little about the Daoyuan realm. The strength of one's cultivation level depended on the Dao path that one opened. The length and width of the path indicated the strength of one's cultivation level. The length of the path had to have some sort of benchmark. At present, the Daoyuan realm experts in the group were all in the early stages of opening their Dao paths. Chu Zan knew that, before he bragged about opening a Dao path that was millions of miles long, the goal of the entire group was to open a Dao path that was 10,000 miles long. This was probably not some random number, but rather some sort of benchmark. Did the Ji family's human king and the other previous Daoyuan realm experts leave after they had achieved this benchmark, or because they had reached a certain limit? Perhaps one would only be able to leave the Great Tao when one's Tao path had become long enough. Were these people beyond the Great Tao? Chu Zan felt it was possible. It seemed that there were a lot of secrets within the Daoyuan realm. He had to be more careful when talking about the Daoyuan realm with others to avoid exposing himself. Once again, he turned his gaze to the heavenly Tao laws. The heavenly Tao laws could also be considered an alternative method of opening up a Tao path. That being said, the heavenly Tao laws were currently not strong enough to be on the same level as opening up one's own Tao path. Still, that would change with time, as the heavenly Tao laws continued their expansion into the 9 zones.